Ms. Romano, you may proceed.
Thank you. Detective, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is David Larson. I'm a detective with the City of Tempe Police Department.
How long have you been employed by the City of Tempe?
I was hired in October of 2001, so about 10 and a half years.
And how long have you been a detective?
I transferred to the Detective Bureau in May of 2005 and was a property detective for about a year, then transferred to the robbery aggravated assault detail for a year, and for the last coming up to 5 years, I've been in the homicide detail, and that's currently where I still am.
I'm going to draw your attention to the date of December 27th, 2009. Were you working that day?
I was on call. I was actually at home at the time, but was available to respond if necessary to any incidents.
And did you get called in that day?
Yes, I did, about 4:30 in the evening.
And was that in connection with an investigation involving a missing baby by the name of Gabriel Johnson?
Yes, it was.
When you received that call, did you immediately go to the station?
I was first advised by the detective sergeant that contacted me to respond to 4605 South Priest, the trailer of 153. While en route, I was called back and advised to respond to the Tempe Police main station to gather further information in a briefing and to respond there.
Okay, and did you in fact do that?
Yes, I did.
You attended the briefing?
Yes, I did.
And got fully advised of the facts surrounding this circumstance at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Once you obtained that information, what did you do next?
I was instructed, it was about 7 p.m. in the evening at that time, to conduct an initial interview with a subject by the name of Frank McQueary. He was the father of Logan McQueary. He was currently at the police main station at that time and was with his son in the vehicle when some text messages and phone calls was received by Logan McQueary by a subject by the name of Elizabeth Johnson. I was to speak with him in regards to that.
And did you in fact speak with him?
Yes, I did.
And was that at the Tempe Police Department?
Yes, it was.
All right. Now you indicated that, was he in the lobby?
He was in the lobby when I contacted him. Myself, I was accompanied with Detective Ryberg. We escorted him to a private sitting area that was inside the police station where we spoke with him there.
And after you spoke with him, did you complete a report regarding the information that he gave you?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you relay that information to anyone else at that time?
Yes, the information obtained was advised to the sergeant at hand of what we learned at that time.
And is that Sergeant King?
It was Sergeant King. Yes, ma'am.
Now, did you also speak with Logan McQueary that day?
Briefly, as I was walking Mr. Frank McQueary back to the lobby, I was just asked to ask Logan McQueary if he was aware of any financial...
I'll rephrase the question.
No, it's not hearsay. It's not the truth of the matter asserted. If we get into beyond that, it might be. So I'm overruling the objection as to that question.
Please go ahead. You were asked.
I was asked to ask Mr. Logan McQueary if he was aware of any financial information that Miss Elizabeth Johnson may have, as in credit cards or debit cards, that we could use to help locate her current location at the time. And he briefly stated...
Wait a minute. Now we're going to get into hearsay. So I don't want you to tell me what he said.
Without telling me what he said, did you get information from him?
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding that subject matter?
Yes, ma'am.
And you relayed that information?
Yes, I did.
Now, a little bit later on, did you go to the address at Priest Drive?
Yes, after that I was instructed, myself and Detective Ryberg responded to 4605 South Priest, number 153. We were advised to make contact with the subject there by the name of Malcolm Phipps and obtain a consent to search and to go through the trailer residence there to see, one, if Gabriel Johnson was in fact still at that trailer or had been harmed in any way or disposed of at that trailer.
And at that time, were you aware that that trailer had been visited by previous officers that day?
We were.
Okay. And was this request made to just complete a thorough investigation of that trailer and the surrounding property?
Yes, it was also made to go as far as to go into the floorboards underneath the trailer, into the shed. There were some flower beds and different areas surrounding the property to check to make sure if there was any evidence that the ground had recently been disturbed or anything and such to that.
All right. Now, You indicated you were instructed to make contact with Malcolm Phipps, and did you in fact do that on that date?
Yes, we did.
And did he give you consent to search the trailer and the surrounding area?
Yes, he did.
All right. And did you in fact search that area?
Yes, we did.
Who was with you when you did that?
Detective Redberg.
And did you find any evidence at that home regarding Gabriel Johnson or his whereabouts?
No, ma'am.
After you conducted that thorough search with Detective Ryberg, were you asked to conduct any further investigation that evening?
It was about, I believe, 10:30 in the evening at that time when we were instructed to respond from that location, myself and Detective Ryberg, to the Glass and Garden Community Church, which I believe was at 8640 East McDonald. Information had been relayed to us that this was a location that Gabriel Johnson was last seen, I believe, on December 17th at this location. We were advised to go there just to check. It was mainly to check communal dumpsters that were in the area, since some of the specifics in the text messages, the information we had learned that he may have been disposed in the dumpster, were to check that if any evidence of Gabriel Johnson being there.
And did Detective Ryberg assist you with that as well?
Yes, he did.
And did you in fact search all the dumpsters at that location?
Yes, we did.
And did you find anything of evidentiary value regarding Gabriel Johnson?
No, ma'am.
Did you return to the Tempe Police Department after that search was conducted?
Yes, we did.
And what did you do then?
At that point, I was assigned to assist Detective Ramirez with an interview of a male subject that she was conducting. I was a secondary officer or a backup officer during that interview. I stood by with her while she conducted that interview at a residence in Tempe and concluded that at about 1:15 in the morning.
And was that an individual by the name of Soren Stanisiu? I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly.
I actually don't recall the gentleman's name.
Thank you. And as far as December 27th is concerned, does that conclude your involvement on December 27th?
Yes, it was now the 28th, early in the morning, and that concluded my involvement.
I'm going to direct your attention now to December 29th, 2009. Did you receive a request to conduct further investigation on that date?
Yes, I did.
And who asked you to conduct further investigation?
On the morning of the 29th, which was now a Tuesday, I made contact with Detective Ramirez, who advised that she had observed some information posted to a MySpace page under the name of Elizabeth Johnson. This was the profile page of the MySpace page, and there had been a quote that appeared on the profile page as well as a mood change. I then responded to my office and went on to MySpace and accessed the MySpace page, which the profile page shows a picture of the subject and then a quote and a mood change. The rest of the page was private, so we couldn't see it. But at that time, I was going to see further of when that change and quote had been added, if the location of where the person was when they made that change could be obtained.
All right. And did you get information regarding those questions?
Yes, I did.
All right. Were you able to find out where the user of that MySpace account had logged in from?
Yes.
And how did you go about obtaining that information?
At that time, I contacted MySpace compliance and asked would the IP or Internet Protocol address be documented when someone logged in to make that change on a page. I advised that it would be. I then created an emergency disclosure request requesting the location and information for that, which I sent to MySpace. This was still on the 29th. Later that day, we received the information for the IP address for that login change that had occurred. We further then researched that. It came back to the Broward County School District, and then upon further research, came back to the Miami-Dade Public Library.
All right. Now, you mentioned a couple times IP address. Can you please explain to the jury for those who may not know what that is, what is an IP address?
Even in my general terms, an IP address stands for Internet Protocol. It's basically the modem that is accessing, it's not the specific computer, but whatever computer is going through the modem to go to a specific location, that IP address is a specific to that modem. So when someone was logging into MySpace and they were going to their page, the computer they were sitting down has to access a modem, and then that modem sends that information away. So that's the modem location is the IP address. And when someone's accessing their page, they have to go through a modem, and that would show the location of that modem.
Okay. And in some sense, is it like a telephone number? It's assigned to a specific area?
Yeah, it's a digit number. I have to look down there. There are probably 15 or 16 digits with numbers with little dots in between, and then from that you can access where that location is.
Okay. Once you obtain information that, what did you do at that point? Did you request any further information?
That information came back at about 3 p.m. on the 29th from MySpace. At that point, I created a second emergency disclosure request. This was on the account and name for Elizabeth Johnson, requesting all information on that MySpace account and any further updates or further accesses by that account. And that was sent to MySpace at the conclusion of the day on the 29th.
Did you receive the information that you requested the following day?
Yes. We're now on, it would be the 30th, which I believe is Wednesday morning. When we responded in, we contacted MySpace Compliance and had learned that since our last contact with MySpace Compliance on Tuesday evening, there were 3 new IP addresses or accesses to the account that had been registered.
And did you request information regarding those IP addresses?
Yes, I did.
And did you receive that information?
Yes, I did.
And where were those addresses located?
The 3 IP addresses were through Atlantic Broadband Communication and owned by that company. We had researched that and made contact with their legal compliance, and they verified that those 3 IP addresses did belong to their country. There are actually 2 same IP addresses, 3 different logins, 2 are the same number, 1 was a different number. We then did an emergency disclosure request to Atlantic Broadband to get the specific location of those modems, of those 3 different logins. Then later on the day, this would still be on the 30th, we received the information back from Atlantic Broadband that the IP addresses, one of them came back to I believe, Santa Barbara Hostel, which is at 230 20th Street in Miami Beach, Florida. And then there was 2 of the logins, which was the same number, came back to the same address, but to a specific residence at that Santa Barbara Hostel. And that information was forwarded to my chain of command at that time.
Okay. And did you receive any further information that day regarding MySpace usage or any account usage on that day?
No, ma'am.
All right. Did you receive information that day that Elizabeth Johnson had been located in Miami, Florida?
Yes, I did.
All right. And was that at around 18:30 hours?
Yes, it was.
6:30 p.m.?
6:30 p.m. our time.
All right. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the date of December 31st, 2009. Did you conduct further investigation into the MySpace account usage at that time?
Yes, on the 31st, which would now be Thursday, I was instructed to see what other user accounts had contact with Miss Elizabeth Johnson's MySpace account. I observed that there was 4 other user ID numbers, which would be for different accounts that had contact, and I did another emergency disclosure request on those 4 different MySpace user ID numbers to obtain the subscriber information for those 4 different user accounts.
And did you receive information regarding the subscribers of those accounts?
I did.
Once you received that information, did you ask for additional, well, let me rephrase that. Once you found out who those user accounts were associated with, did you request further information from MySpace?
I was advised on once we had identified one of those users, I was instructed to request the full MySpace page through an emergency disclosure request on one of those users.
Okay, and which user was that?
It was Tammi Smith.
So you drafted another emergency order?
Yes, this was
time?
on the 31st.
Okay, and did you receive the information that you requested regarding Tammi Smith's MySpace account?
I received it on the 31st.
And what did you do with that information at that time?
All the information that I've advised over the past 2 days that I received was impounded then as evidence.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective
Good afternoon.
Larson. I just have a few questions for you, sir. You went to Elizabeth's trailer on December the 27th and searched around a little bit, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've already told us that you didn't find anything related to Gabriel, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you also, you did not find anything related to Jack or Tammi Smith in the trailer, did you?
We were looking for Gabriel Johnson himself.
And then later that day, you went to the church location in Scottsdale.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was at the direction of Detective Ramirez?
That was at the direction of Sergeant King.
And were you aware that that was the location where the Smiths had returned Gabriel to Elizabeth?
I was advised.
And by the way, throughout this, you've never had contact with Jack or Tammi Smith, right?
No, ma'am.
And so you've told us that you looked up Elizabeth's MySpace page, or you were given the information about Elizabeth's MySpace page.
Yes, ma'am.
And that information came from Detective Ramirez.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did Detective Ramirez tell you that she got that information from Tammi Smith?
I don't recall.
Okay, so you contacted the MySpace people and you got more information about Elizabeth's MySpace page, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were looking for the IP address,
The location we were attempting to locate Miss Johnson.
which you've already explained what an IP address is, and in fact, that is how she was located, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you, at some point, you drafted an emergency disclosure request to get the additional information about Elizabeth's MySpace account.
Yes, ma'am.
And basically, it's just a letter that says, this is an emergency situation, here's why, send me the information.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and they sent you that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you've testified that there were 4 other users whose information you received that day.
On the 31st.
On
Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth, yes, on the 31st, on Elizabeth's account.
Yes, ma'am.
One of them was Tammi Smith.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Another one of those contacts was a Cassie Newman.
Yes, ma'am.
Another one of those contacts was a Vanessa Lopez.
Vanessa Lopes.
Vanessa Lopes,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And did you ever do any follow-up with Cassie Newman?
No, ma'am.
Did you do any follow-up with Vanessa Lopes?
No, ma'am.
Do you know if anybody did any follow-up with Cassie Newman?
No, ma'am.
Do you know if anybody did any follow-up with Vanessa Lopes?
No, ma'am.
But you do know that they had MySpace contact with Elizabeth in December of 2009.
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, you acquired all of Elizabeth's MySpace postings for the past or the previous 3 years or so, didn't you?
I do not recall the extent of it since I did not review it. That was not my assignment. I just obtained what MySpace had sent in regards to her account.
You would agree, though, it was more than just the December 2009 postings.
I'd have to look at it to see how far it went back. I do not recall how long it went.
Would you agree that it was a significant stack of paper?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so it wasn't your job to review it.
No, ma'am.
So it was excerpted. You took what you thought was relevant, right? For the purposes of this case, you took the postings that you thought were relevant for this case.
In regards to?
The relevance to this case, to Elizabeth and her contact with her other MySpace friends.
I know what was sent to me was all impounded, and I know other detectives were assigned to go through it as far as the specifics in it. I know that there was the most recent contacts is where I received the information of her last updates, which were messages, which I do remember reading, and those might have been submitted along as attachments with my report as well.
Okay, do you recall doing an interview with me and Ms. Andrews on February 9th of this year?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember that I asked you the following question? And so, did you take everything from a particular date range, or did you just pull out the ones that referenced the baby, or you pulled out the ones with the Smiths, and then you said, in regards to this? And I said, yes. And your answer was, these were the last ones that came through. Does that
Yes, that does.
Okay, and that's a fair statement of what you said in the interview?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you did review them to some extent.
The most recent ones that came through. Yes, ma'am.
And again, you followed the same process that you did with Elizabeth's account to get Tammy's MySpace account information.
An emergency disclosure request was sent. Yes, ma'am.
Right, which was just a letter, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you were able to get Tammy's MySpace postings with just a letter, just that letter.
Yes, ma'am.
And someone else reviewed those.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect, Ms. Romano. You may.
Detective, could you just explain in a little bit of detail what the request, the form, is it a form or is it she mentioned a letter, defense counsel mentioned a letter. What is it that you send to obtain this information?
It was actually a form sent by MySpace. It's their emergency disclosure request. It's a form that they send that we complete and sign and send back to them, as well as Atlantic Broadband had a similar form that they sent to us that we completed and sent back to them.
And is this something that's only available to law enforcement, as far as you know?
This was my first time using it through both MySpace and Atlantic Broadband. I asked what was necessary to obtain the information, and they advised that's what it was, and they sent it to me.
All right, and you introduced yourself as being associated with the Tempe Police Department
Yes,
when you
ma'am.
spoke with them, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and they requested information regarding the investigation and your involvement in it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Before we let Detective Larson step down, do we have any questions for him from the jury? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused, Ms. Romano?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Phillips?
No objection.
You may step down, Detective. Thank you. And the state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Frank McQueary.
Okay. Go ahead and get Mr. McQueary. And Ms. Andrews, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. McQueary, would you go ahead and introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Frank McQueary.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about who's in your family? Let's start with who lives in your household with you.
At this present time, my girlfriend, Jamie Martinez, and her son, Matthew Martinez, and his girlfriend.
And how old is Matthew?
Matthew is 23 or 24.
And does Jamie have any other children?
Yes, her daughter, Jordan Martinez.
Does Jordan live in the Phoenix area?
Yes, she lives not far from us.
Tell us about your children.
My children, I have 4 children. Jennifer Hunter, my oldest daughter, Logan McQueary, my oldest son, Trenton McQueary, and my youngest daughter, Nicole.
Do you have other family members who live in the Phoenix area or who lived in the Phoenix area around December of 2009?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us who those people were.
My brother, Will McQueary, his wife, Kelly McQueary. They have 4 children, Justin, Jessica, Jake, and Jenna. Then I have my mother-in-law, Dorothy Woodard, Kathy and Mike Pulliam, which were my deceased wife's sister and her husband, Sandy and Joe Peters, my deceased wife's sister and her husband, and then Mike Woodard and his wife Lori. They're 3 kids, all adults, Andrew, Amber, and Adam. And that's pretty much the immediate family, and not counting my girlfriend Jamie's sisters and their family, and there's more of them than I can name.
And you mentioned your deceased wife. When did she pass?
2008, April.
Now, you mentioned a lot of family members. Did you ever participate in any family gatherings with some of those family members?
Yes.
And did your children participate in those family gatherings?
Yes.
Specifically, how about Logan? Did he participate in any family gatherings?
Yes, he did.
What types of family gatherings does your family have?
Birthday parties, barbecues, get together on different holidays for different things.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a retired police officer with the City of Phoenix. I currently volunteer as a reserve officer for the city.
What does a reserve officer do generally?
Everything that a officer that gets paid by the city does. It just depends upon your qualifications and where you choose to work.
And when you say everything that a paid officer does, do you not get paid for your work?
I do not get paid by the City of Phoenix. One of the benefits that is available to you as a reserve officer is you can also participate in the off-duty work that comes available through various contractors and vendors that require the services of a police officer.
And is that paid work?
That's paid work.
When did you retire from the Phoenix Police Department?
In February of 2007.
And have you been working as a reserve since you retired?
Yes, I have.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Logan? What has your relationship been like with him?
I have a fairly good relationship with Logan. He comes to me, asks me for advice, not as often as I would like, but I don't think any parent thinks that their kid comes to them as often as they should. Sometimes he does things that make me mad like anybody else. But overall, I think we have a fairly decent relationship.
Do you recall meeting Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
When you met Elizabeth Johnson, was she in a relationship with Logan?
At the time that I met her, yes.
And about how much contact did you have with Elizabeth Johnson while she was in a relationship with Logan?
Off and on. Elizabeth didn't like me very well, so I didn't have as much contact with her as I did with Logan. Logan would come and see me without Elizabeth.
Is there a specific reason that you're aware of that Elizabeth didn't like you?
I wouldn't put up with the way she acted towards people, and she knew that. I expected people to be reasonable and responsible and act decent towards other people.
At some point in time, did you learn that Elizabeth Johnson was pregnant?
I did.
And who did you learn that from?
From Logan.
And when you learned that, what was his reaction to the pregnancy?
He was happy at that point, a little bit scared and pretty nervous.
And at some point in time, on May 3rd, Gabriel was born. Correct?
Yes.
And did you have, when did you first meet Gabriel?
I went to the hospital that morning.
The morning of his birth?
Yes.
And when you went to the hospital, you've indicated that your relationship with Elizabeth wasn't great. What was her reaction to you being at the hospital the day Gabriel was born?
She wasn't super happy to see me, but she was cordial.
And while you were there at the hospital, did you see Logan there at the hospital?
Yes, I did.
Were you there first, or was Logan there first?
I was there first, and then he came 15, 20 minutes after I arrived.
And was he supposed to be there?
No.
Is that because he was on work furlough?
Yes.
Between the time that Elizabeth Johnson was pregnant before Gabriel was born, did you have any conversations with Logan about the possibility of adoption?
Yes, I did.
And was that something that he indicated he wanted to pursue at that time?
No, it was not.
And this was prior to Gabriel being born?
This was prior to Gabriel being born, yes.
Did you and Logan ever have any conversations after that time about the idea of having Gabriel adopted?
Yes.
And during those conversations, was it in regard to Logan's desire to have him adopted?
No, it was me asking him what he wanted to do prior to us going and filing custody paperwork.
And was that in December of 2009?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your interaction with Elizabeth and Gabriel. What was Elizabeth's reaction with Gabriel when you were able to observe?
There was no bonding there. There was no. Gabriel was at times an annoyance. At times she didn't want to deal with him whatsoever. I recall on one occasion we were at the care home where my mother-in-law was, and he was asleep, and she wanted him to wake up and smile so that somebody could take a picture, and she was flicking the bottom of his foot, pinching his toes, and it's like, I told her, don't do that. He's asleep. He's a baby. He's supposed to sleep. Leave him alone. But she was bound and determined that she was going to get him to wake up so that somebody could take his picture.
What was Logan's interaction with Gabriel when you saw them together?
Logan cared for Gabriel. Logan fed him. Logan changed his diapers. Logan put him in the bathtub. Logan took him to daycare because he didn't feel he could trust Elizabeth to take care of him while he was at work. Logan did everything he possibly could to take care of Gabriel. He was a pretty proud dad.
Now, you talked about Logan taking Gabriel to daycare. Was there a time when you picked Gabriel up from daycare?
Yes.
Did that happen one time or more than one time?
Just one time.
Okay. And what were the circumstances surrounding the time that you picked Gabriel up?
Elizabeth had been arrested. She had destroyed their apartment. She'd been in a physical confrontation with the police officers there. And he was at daycare, and they needed somebody to go get him.
When you went to pick Gabriel up that day, did the daycare seem surprised to have you there picking him up?
No, they had been contacted that I was on the way to get him.
Did you have to show them your badge or anything to be able to take Gabriel that day?
No.
After you took Gabriel from the daycare, where did you go with Gabriel?
We went back to the apartment complex there.
And did you see Logan that night?
Yes.
And what was Logan's demeanor and reaction to everything?
He was very upset. He'd worked really hard to establish that place for them to live. They'd made it into a nice home. He was clean. It was nice. He'd tried really hard to make a nice home for the three of them there.
Well, let's talk about that home. Where was it?
It was in Tempe. I don't remember the address. It was west of Scottsdale Road and south of Thomas, north of McDowell. But I couldn't tell you the address off the top of my head.
And what type of residence was it?
It was an apartment complex, had a group of 3 separate buildings, I believe, with a fenced-in swimming pool. It was a nice place.
How many bedrooms was the apartment?
His apartment was 2 bedrooms.
And were there items in there for Gabriel?
Yes.
What type of items were in there?
They had a crib, a bassinet, dresser, baby toys, swing set, clothing, the bottles, everything they needed.
And the night that we talked about where you picked up Gabriel from the daycare, do you remember what time frame that was?
That would have been 4 or 5 o'clock around. It was afternoon, towards afternoon, evening.
And what time of year?
Late summer, August, September, October, somewhere around there.
And when Logan and Gabriel were with you, did you at some point learn that Elizabeth had accused either you or Gabriel of kidnapping you or Logan of kidnapping Gabriel that time?
Yeah, that was the next day.
And how did you learn of that accusation?
I had taken Logan to Tempe City Court to obtain an order of protection. And the Scottsdale Police Department, we had our phones shut off because we were in court, had called my phone and Logan's phone, and they were at the daycare with Elizabeth, who had gotten out of jail before we could have the order served on her, and was telling them that we'd kidnapped the child.
Now, did Gabriel go to daycare that morning?
No, Gabriel did not go to daycare that morning.
At some point during that day, did you then return Gabriel to either the police or Elizabeth?
No.
What happened with Gabriel then?
We had the order of protection served against Elizabeth. The judge had granted Logan temporary guardianship of Gabriel until they could go to court and deal with the order. So Gabriel stayed at my house.
How much longer did Gabriel stay at your house after that point?
About another 5 days.
And during the time that Gabriel was at your house, who cared for him?
Logan cared for him. Part of the time I cared for him. Jamie cared for him. Jamie's daughter, Jordan, was living at the house then. She helped babysit as well.
And at some point in time, was Gabriel returned to Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes, Logan, the order was quashed, and Logan decided he was going to try one more time with Elizabeth.
So they reconciled?
Yes.
On December 8th, 2009, did Logan appear at your home again?
Actually, I went and got him from his grandmother's, yes, took him to my house.
And tell us what led up to you picking him up from his grandmother's.
He called me and told me that he had broken up with Elizabeth, that he had Gabriel, but Elizabeth had called the Tempe Police Department, and they had told Logan that he needed to return Gabriel or they were going to arrest him for custodial interference because he and Elizabeth weren't legally married and he didn't have any legal rights to keep him from her.
And at that time, did you then pick up Logan from his grandmother's?
I did.
And where was Gabriel?
Gabriel had been returned to Elizabeth by then.
Before you got there?
Yes.
And at that time, did Logan come stay with you?
Yes, he did.
On December 9th, did you receive contact from Logan the very next day?
I did.
And what was that contact in relation to?
Elizabeth had gone to his work and was having a confrontation there. Had accused him of kidnapping the baby.
And at that point in time, did you know where Gabriel was?
I did not.
Did you at some point arrive at Logan's work?
I did.
About how long passed between the time he called you and you arrived at his work?
I drove there right away. I was concerned about the safety of the baby because Logan told me that the baby was not there with her. He didn't know where the baby was. So 35 minutes maybe.
And while you were there at Logan's work, did you have contact with police?
I did. Limited contact, yes.
And was that the Tempe Police Department?
Yes, it was.
How long did you stay there at Logan's work?
I stayed there. We were there several hours, 3 hours maybe, a long time.
And that was at the 99-cent store?
Yes.
When you left there, Logan's work, were you aware of Gabriel's whereabouts?
No,
Did you know whether or not he was safe somewhere?
we did not.
Where did you go when you left?
I took Logan and took him back to my house.
And at one point in time, did you hear that Gabriel was safe?
Yes.
And Where did you hear that from?
From Logan.
And do you know where Logan obtained that information?
From the Tempe Police Department. He received a phone call. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I know that because the phone call woke me up, the phone ringing.
And so it was at the early morning hours of December 9th, 2009, the day after?
Yes.
When you learned that Gabriel was safe in the early morning hours of December 9th, 2009, did anybody advise you where he was?
No, they refused. I had that discussion with Logan, and all they would say was that he was safe, and they wouldn't tell us where.
At some point in time, well, let me ask you, on that day, on December 9th, 2009, were you aware of Tammi or Jack Smith?
No.
At some point in time, did you learn the names of Tammi and Jack Smith?
Yes.
Do you recall how it is you learned that information?
I don't. Someplace along the process of filing for custody and all of those things, their name was provided during that process, and I can't recall whether it was during the court process or what, but I believe it was sometime during that first court hearing.
And when you first learned of Tammi and Jack Smith, did you have any particular concerns about them?
I had some concerns because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know who was caring for my grandson. And so you have some concerns, but I didn't know them.
Now, you talked about custody hearing, and we've heard testimony already from Logan that there was a filing for custody. Were you involved in Logan's filing for custody that occurred after December 9th, 2009?
Yes, I was. I took him down to the court, walked him through the process, filling out the paperwork and filing everything for the emergency hearing.
And was that December 14th, 2009?
Yes.
And then there was a hearing on December 17th, 2009, correct?
Yes.
Were you present at that hearing as well?
Yes, I was.
And we actually heard that hearing, but we didn't get to see it. Was the courtroom somewhat similar to this courtroom as far as the setup?
Yes, it is. It's smaller, but similar.
Could you please describe, just kind of show us around in this courtroom where Logan was sitting, Elizabeth was sitting, and where you may have been in the courtroom?
Certainly. Logan would have been sitting to my right. Elizabeth was sitting here. The judge's bench was here, and I was sitting in the front row seats behind Logan.
And do you recall anybody else other than perhaps court staff being in the courtroom at that time?
There was nobody besides the three of us and court staff.
At the time that you were there in the hearing, did you have plans to meet with Tammi or Jack Smith for lunch that day?
No.
Had you had any contact with Tammi and Jack Smith?
No.
To your knowledge, had Logan had any contact with Tammi and Jack Smith prior to that hearing?
No.
At that hearing, were you ever provided any information that you were supposed to obtain pictures of Gabriel with Santa Claus?
No.
After that hearing, that day, did you see somebody that known to you that day as Tammi Smith?
I saw somebody with Elizabeth, but I didn't know who it was.
Okay. Why don't you tell us where you saw this person with Elizabeth and when it was in relation to the hearing?
Logan and I had exited out of the courthouse. We were on the north side of the courthouse on Washington Street, and I saw a woman talking very directly, very energetically with Elizabeth. They were by the west end of the courthouse where it opens up into kind of a little park area, and I stopped Logan. We were walking towards the parking garage, and I said, we're just going to wait here. You wanted a cigarette anyway. I said, I don't want to have any kind of a confrontation out here on the street, so we're just going to wait here, smoke your cigarette, and let them do whatever they need to do.
So you didn't approach Elizabeth and the woman that she was with at the time?
No.
Did Elizabeth have Gabriel with her at that time?
No.
Did the woman who was with Elizabeth have Gabriel with her at the time?
No.
Did you see Gabriel anywhere around the courthouse?
I did not.
Did you have any information that Gabriel would be there at the courthouse?
None whatsoever.
As we heard from the hearing, Elizabeth told the judge that Gabriel was coming to the courthouse. Were you aware that Gabriel was on his way to the courthouse?
No.
Had you made any prior arrangements with the Smiths to see Gabriel that day?
Did not even know who they were. No.
Were there any prior arrangements made with Elizabeth to meet for lunch?
No.
Were there any prior arrangements with Elizabeth for you to see Gabriel that day with Elizabeth?
No.
Now, you've indicated you didn't know who this woman was who was talking to Elizabeth at the time you saw her on the day of the court hearing. Did you later learn who this woman was?
Yes.
And how did you learn who she was?
Through this process, I recognized her as Tammi Smith.
Okay. And do you recognize that person here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Would you please indicate where she's sitting and what she's wearing?
She's sitting at the defense table in the middle with the brownish tan color dress.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant?
It shall so reflect.
How did you feel about how the hearing went?
I was disappointed in the judge's actions. I thought that we had important information that needed to be brought to his attention. And I was not allowed to speak at all. And he pretty much cut Logan off when Logan tried to explain how things were with Elizabeth and the reasons that we had applied for the emergency hearing instead of waiting the 30 to 60 days to get a normal hearing date.
In fact, did Logan try and tell the judge why he had contacted CPS in this case?
Yes.
And was he able to tell the judge at that point?
No.
Did Elizabeth tell the judge anything about the baby being given to the couple who was going to adopt them?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Co-conspirator statement, Your Honor.
We're talking about Elizabeth Johnson's statement. Overruled.
No.
that-
Well, Elizabeth said that the baby was at a babysitter's.
At some point in time during this case, did you advise Logan to tape record conversations?
Yes, I did.
What was the reason you told him to record conversations?
After Elizabeth went to his work and accused him of kidnapping the baby, and we spent all those hours there waiting for Tempe to figure things out, I told him that he needed to tape record every conversation that he had with her, not to be alone with her, and simply as a matter of self-protection.
And did you provide him a recorder?
Yes, I did.
And how was it that you had a recorder to provide him?
I was a detective for a number of years, and I used that during the course of my investigations.
Have you ever personally had a conversation with either Tammi or Jack Smith?
I have not.
Between December 8th, 2009 and today, have you had any conversations with Elizabeth Johnson?
Your dates again?
December 8th, 2009 and today.
No.
At some point in time, as Logan testified, he received a phone call, or he made a phone call actually to Tammi Smith. Did he talk to you about that phone call?
Yes.
What was his demeanor and reaction about that particular first phone call he had with Tammi Smith?
He was puzzled as to why the Smiths were involved in this. but he wasn't overly alarmed, but we were all puzzled.
At some point in time during the contact that Logan had with the Smiths, well, let me ask you this. Did he talk to you about other contacts he had with the Smiths?
Objection, hearsay.
It doesn't yet call for hearsay, so you can answer the question as asked. Did he talk to you?
Yes.
And after these subsequent conversations with the Smiths, did his demeanor about them change?
Yes, it did.
And what was his demeanor like when he talked about subsequent conversations with the Smiths?
He was becoming worried and frustrated and apprehensive.
Now, I asked you previously about conversation you had with Logan about adoption before Gabriel was born. Did you have any conversation with Logan about his desire to have the Smiths adopt Gabriel Johnson?
Yes.
Did he desire for them to do that?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
On December 20th, 2009, were you with Logan when he went to Elizabeth Johnson's residence?
Yes.
And what happened when you were there?
I drove him there. I told him to turn the tape recorder on, walk up to the door, make sure that the recorder was functioning. I didn't know how Elizabeth was going to act, so I wanted some proof to counter anything that she might possibly come up with, which was one of the reasons that I went with him. I didn't want him to go there alone. Knocked on the door and received no response.
And at some point in time, did Logan receive communications from Elizabeth prior to December 27, 2009 that he discussed with you?
Yes.
And what was his demeanor about those communications?
Extremely upset and very worried.
And on December 27, 2009, you tell us what happened that day.
Again, we were at my mother-in-law's at the care home where she was. With Sandy and Joe, her daughter and son-in-law. And Logan contacted me and said I'm on my way there.
Objection, hearsay.
Anything beyond that statement, I think that statement is not necessarily hearsay, but if we're going to start relating things that he told you, we're probably getting into hearsay.
Let me ask you this. You were at the care home for your mother-in-law.
Yes.
Was Logan with you at some point there?
He was on his way there, yes.
Okay. And he contacted you?
Yes.
Okay. And when he arrived, did he talk to you about communications he had with Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
And what was his demeanor regarding those communications?
Very upset, very worried.
And did you observe the communications?
Yes.
At some point in time, did you go to the police station?
I sent Logan to the police station and then I followed behind him about 10 minutes later, yes.
When you sent him to the police station, did he arrive back at your mother-in-law's care home before going to the police station?
Yes, because the Mesa Police Department, their main building is the next block over, and I sent him there, and they told him he had to go to...
Objection, hearsay.
Things already been established. But it still is hearsay, so sustained.
So you sent Logan to the Mesa Police Department?
Yes.
And did you meet him at the Mesa Police Department?
I did not.
Where did you meet him?
Back at the care home.
Okay. And did you at some point in time go to the Tempe Police Department?
Yes, I sent him there.
And when you went to the Tempe Police Department, did you talk to police while you were there?
I did.
Now, while at the Tempe Police Department, did Logan provide his recorder to the police?
Yes.
Did you give him another recorder after that?
Bought him another one within the next day or two, yes.
At some point in time, you testified that you learned about Tammi and Jack Smith, but you're not quite sure when it was that you learned about them. But at some point in time, did you research them?
Yes.
And what was it that you did to research Tammi and Jack Smith?
I used internet on my computer, searched through public records available to anybody, which are in this state are real estate transactions.
And any information you learned about them, did you provide that to the police?
Yes.
Did you locate an address and phone number for Tammi and Jack Smith?
Yes,
Yeah. Did you provide that to Logan?
I did.
Is that the phone number he used to call Tammi Smith?
It is.
Did you ever go to their home?
No.
What other means did you use to research Tammi and Jack Smith?
Again, we used the internet and some other people at our request befriended them on Facebook.
And what do you mean by some other people at your request befriended them?
My girlfriend's daughter, Jordan Martinez, and my sister-in-law, Kathy Pulliam.
And when you say befriended them, was it both Jack and Tammi, or just one of them?
Just Tammy.
And maybe if you could explain a little bit, just in case there's anybody who doesn't know how that works, how is it you befriend somebody there on Facebook?
You contact them and you send them a friend request, which is a little self-initiated document that Facebook has that says, I want to be your friend. If they accept you as a friend, then it gives you access to the material that they establish upon their account. Pictures, anything and all that they place upon there.
And did you ever look at Tammi Smith's Facebook page?
Yes.
And what did you see on there?
Pictures of Gabriel at Christmas time when we were desperately trying to find him.
How do you know they were pictures of him at Christmas time?
Because he was with Santa Claus.
How did you feel about that?
Not very happy.
Why?
It's my grandson. These are people that I don't know interfering with my grandson, with my son, with our relationship with Gabriel. And not happy at all.
Were you aware the Smiths had taken Gabriel to Santa Claus?
No.
After the hearing on December 17th, 2009, who was Gabriel supposed to be living with?
With us.
And before you went to the hearing, did you have furniture and everything available for Gabriel?
No.
Did you purchase furniture for Gabriel?
Yes.
When did you do that?
Right after that day.
And
after
what types of things did you purchase for Gabriel?
We purchased a crib, new clothing, new car seat, high chair, diapers, everything that he would need.
And what was your understanding of where Gabriel was supposed to be during the Christmas time?
Christmas time, we were supposed to have Gabriel and then return him Christmas morning to Elizabeth.
And did you have plans for Gabriel over Christmas?
Absolutely, we did.
What were your plans?
We were having Christmas there at our place. Prior to taking him back, we had planned to take him to see his great-grandmother. She and Logan have a special relationship together, have had for a number of years. And because we knew we were going to have to return him to Elizabeth Christmas Day.
And would this have been Gabriel's first Christmas?
Yes.
What has Logan's reaction been to this whole custody issue the whole custody issue?
Ranges the gamut from tears to frustration to just depression.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. I think before we go forward with cross-examination, we're at the point of our afternoon break. So we're going to take our afternoon break for about 15 minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll come back around 3:15. Until then, remember the admonition, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.
All rise for the jury.
Okay, please be seated, everyone. We are outside the presence of the jury. Mr. McQueary, you can step down. You don't have to stay up there. My thought would be that after the break, we'll go ahead through cross-examination and redirect, and then we'll end for the day there because we're getting to the point for the hearing on the motion to quash subpoena. And then we can also take up other issues that I think the state indicated you wanted to talk about the Florida issue in terms of admissibility. Is it Exhibit 146, I think it is? It's my memory says 146. I'm not sure.
I don't recall without looking at it.
Okay, well, we can discuss that issue after the hearing as well. Anybody need to talk about anything before we take our break and go to cross-examination?
No, not from the state. Your Honor.
All right, I'll see you in about 15 minutes. And Ms. Phillips, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. McQueary.
Good afternoon.
Sir, let me take your attention back to the night of December the 9th, 2009. That was the night that Elizabeth went to Logan's work,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And she accused him of kidnapping Gabriel.
Yes.
And you later learned that Gabriel was safe,
Yes.
and you learned that from the Tempe Police Department.
I learned it from Logan, who learned it from them, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. But they wouldn't tell either you or Logan where Gabriel was.
Correct.
And you testified that you went to Logan's work that night and you were there about 3 hours.
Yes.
And you saw Elizabeth there that night, didn't you?
Yes.
And she was clearly intoxicated, wasn't she?
I don't know. I didn't have contact with her. I didn't speak to her.
You saw her?
Yes.
Okay. And the police came and took her away, right?
That night?
You saw,
When?
yes, that night.
When we left, they were still there talking to her.
So I'm going to direct your attention to March 19th of this year. You and I had an interview at the county attorney's office. Do you recall?
Yes.
And do you recall, we talked about this very incident.
Yes.
And do you remember telling me she was obviously intoxicated the night that Tempe arrested her? Extremely intoxicated?
Yes, but we're talking about two different nights.
Oh, that was a different night that you
Yeah.
observed her intoxicated that she was arrested.
That was the night that she destroyed their apartment.
Okay. I'm sorry. I had those confused. Okay. So let's talk about that night then, the night that you did observe her intoxicated when she was arrested.
Okay.
And she was arrested for criminal damage. That was the night that she was arrested for criminal damage?
Yes.
Okay. And that's when you saw the police come and take her away.
Yes.
And as the police were driving away with her in the patrol car, she was beating her head into the side of the vehicle, wasn't she?
Yes.
Now, on either the occasion where Elizabeth accused Logan of kidnapping or the night we just talked about where she was arrested for criminal damage, at least on one of those nights, Elizabeth's grandfather was also present.
On the night where she was arrested, yes.
And she wasn't arrested for the false reporting of the kidnapping?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Is it fair to say that Logan was afraid of Elizabeth?
At certain times, yes, I think he was.
Okay, and he was afraid of her behavior.
Yes.
And you testified that you are aware of some of the bad things that she has done in the past, correct?
Yes.
And you witnessed some of those bad things, as you've told us.
Yes.
And you witnessed not just one, but two apartments that she destroyed, correct?
Correct.
And I believe that you described it in our interview together that the apartment was completely demolished.
Yes, that's a very accurate statement, yes.
Was that the first apartment or the second apartment?
Both.
And by demolished, you mean the mirrors in the bathroom were broken
Yes,
and Logan's clothes were cut up
yes.
and she had actually thrown some stuff out the window?
At the second one, yes. She threw stuff through all the windows.
And she was arrested just one time for criminal damage?
Correct.
The second time?
Yes.
And she basically had committed similar damage both times?
Yes.
She also cut furniture?
Yep.
She used a knife to cut the bed?
Yes, she did.
And one of the times she broke the television set?
Yes.
You've known Elizabeth for a few years now, right?
Yes.
And you saw her many times prior to Gabriel's birth.
I saw her a few times, not a bunch, no.
And after Gabriel was born, you observed her with Gabriel.
Yes.
Do you remember how many times approximately you saw her with Gabriel?
Oh, 8 or 10 times, not many more than that. I did not have, she didn't want to be around me.
And she didn't want you around Gabriel?
No, that was her way of controlling Logan.
When you did see Elizabeth with Gabriel, can you describe for us in a little more detail what you observed?
She really didn't want anything to do with Gabriel. If there were people watching, then there was a little bit of an act. But when nobody was really paying attention, she wanted nothing to do with him.
And you talked a little bit about your plans for Gabriel for Christmas of 2009, correct?
Yes.
And the reason, though, that you did not have Gabriel at Christmas time was because by then Elizabeth had already left the state with him.
We didn't know that at the time, but yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect, Ms. Sanders? Thank you. Does the jury have any questions for Mr. McQueary before we let him go? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused, Ms. Andrews?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes, he can be excused. Yes.
You may step down. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess good news for you. I have some matters I have to take up now that are going to take up the rest of the day, so you're going to get to go home early. So we're going to end early today and come back tomorrow and start closer to 10:30 than we did today. That's as much as I'll commit to, but hopefully get going right at 10:30 tomorrow. Until then, remember the admonition. Have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All rise for the jury.
Okay, please be seated, everyone. Okay. This is the time we've set for, we're outside the presence of the jury on the record. This is the time set for a hearing on the state's motion to quash the subpoena or the alternative motion for protective order. I think we've got Mr. Nolan here from the Attorney General's office, if you want to come on up. The motion was filed on April 20th, and I've reviewed it. I understand that at least it was the state's intention on talking to Mr. Nolan to see if we could at least narrow the issues and maybe eliminate the issues that we have to deal with. Maybe we haven't, and if we haven't, that's what I'm here to do today. So, Ms. Andrews, you want to tell me where we're at from your perspective, and obviously I'll hear from Mr. Nolan as well.
Your Your Honor, we have essentially, Mr. Nolan provided me some information this afternoon that clarified one factual issue we thought we were going to need Judge McVeigh to clarify. We no longer need him for that. I've talked to his judicial assistant about some of the other questions that I have that I think he can answer. I think Judge McVeigh's biggest concern was the factual questions we wanted to ask him could have come out from other witnesses. And at this point, I think he's right. I don't know of anything specific that we really need to call Judge McVeigh for at this point after talking to people I've talked to. So we're not inclined to call Judge McVeigh in our case in chief at this point. I have told Mr. Nolan if something comes up before rebuttal that was raised, that I would call him and discuss it with him. I can't imagine that happening, but if it did come up, I would call and talk to him about that. But at this time, we weren't intending to call Judge McVeigh any longer.
Okay. And of course, with you not planning on calling him for any factual matters, you can't call him for matters that might be non-factual, meaning why did you do something, or explain what happened and why. Let me ask Ms. Phillips, was there any intent or did you project calling Judge McVeigh?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, well, that was easy. So it looks like the state's no longer intending on calling Judge McVeigh. If that intent is expressed again, we need to do two things. One, obviously let Mr. Nolan know right away. And then presumably we'll need to talk again then about whether there's a continuing objection. If so, I'll resolve it at that time. Mr. Nolan, from your perspective, you didn't have to say anything and you're successful.
It's about as easy as it gets. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing.
Okay.
I understand.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. All right. Other issues that we need to resolve. The state, I know we have at least one that we can resolve now. We have some time. We're here, and the state had indicated to me that they wanted to raise the issue of evidence obtained in Florida again so they could assess whether they needed to bring a witness in from Florida. So I'm not sure if it's Ms. Andrews or Ms. Ramuno who wants to raise that issue.
Your Honor, I will, because we're not really going to discuss the admissibility of the item. It's item number 196 that we were seeking to admit, which is actually the report from the GPS device, not necessarily the GPS device itself. The defense expressed concern because we didn't have the witness who actually obtained that from Elizabeth Johnson in Miami, Florida. We have talked to Miami, Florida. We can have a witness available to come in and testify. There are actually two different individuals who could do that. We don't know which one of them is the one who's going to get on the plane for us. My question is, according to what we understand today, is two police officers had contact with Elizabeth Johnson. They obtained her backpack, and then they were in contact with the FBI as well, who works there in Miami. Together, they looked at the items, and then that FBI agent is the one who packaged it and sent it to our detectives here in Arizona. So my question is, if we bring in the people who actually obtained it off Elizabeth Johnson, is that enough to get us to where the report would be admissible, or are we going to have to bring in the FBI agent who actually sent it to us here in Arizona? The FBI agent's information is on the packaging information in the exhibit that we obtained that has the actual GPS device.
Well, we start with the question of whether the defense would object if you don't bring the FBI agent in. That's the first question, and the answer to that question is?
I would not object if we skipped the FBI agent. What I would like, though, is an offer of proof of what they're going to say, since we have not interviewed the officers in Miami and don't know what they're going to say, and I don't want to get them here and then have the same argument that we've had. And again, I would make whatever arguments I felt necessary at the time, but I'd like to know from the state specifically what they think one of these two officers is going to say.
Well, I think you're entitled to find that out. You're also entitled, I think, and I would encourage you to take advantage of hopefully an opportunity to interview the officers before they testify. I'm sure the state can make them available to you. So you'll know firsthand what they're going to say and can ask them any questions you want to ask. I just want to make sure with you now representing that we don't need the FBI agent to bridge the chain of custody, that the state then relies on that, and I rely on it, and then you object and say, wait a minute, because the officers say something along the lines of, yes, we had contact with Elizabeth Johnson, we took a GPS device, after that, we don't know, we gave it to the FBI. Objection. Based on Bull Cumming or some related authority, they can't, I know you're not offering the GPS, but offering data from the GPS to me functionally is going to be the same thing, at least for my analysis. If you're planning on doing that, we need to hear it now so they can bring in the FBI agent. If you tell me you're not, then I'm going to likely overrule your objection when you make it, if you do.
Judge, here's my concern is, I mean, I think I'd be less concerned once I've talked to, if they can come in and say, hey, you know, these are the items, and I think there's probably some other items that they want to use them for, at least for the GPS. This is the GPS item that we found. And if they can say that, great. I don't think the FBI tampered with it. And I don't think the FBI added stuff to it. I'm not going to go. I mean, I just don't have any reason to believe that. That being said, but if they can't come in and say, well, I don't remember, and this isn't it, and I don't know, and then I think we need the FBI agent.
Well, if they came in and said, I don't know what it is, I'm not letting it in because they haven't established the foundation to get it in anyway.
Exactly, Judge. So, I mean, but like I said, I don't believe the FBI tampered with any items in this case, and I'm certainly not going to argue that. So I'm okay with that, as long as we have, the officers from Miami that can come in and explain what this is and how they got it. Then I think we're further down the road to laying the foundation for this. And I'm not going to argue the point, dragging an FBI agent and say, yes, I packaged this. And from my reading of the police report, and then I handed it off to a Tempe officer, I'm okay with us skipping that step. But I'm not okay with the one before that, where we're talking about how this item was obtained, where it was obtained, all of those things.
You are reserving your right to challenge the Florida officers should they not provide enough information to your liking for foundation, and you obviously would reserve that right.
Yes.
What we're talking about is there being no objection because we're missing a piece, meaning the FBI agent. You're telling me you won't object based on that.
No.
You, of course, retain the right to object to the Florida officers providing sufficient information if they can't identify the package or the items. Then you're probably going to win an argument that the state hasn't established the foundation. We'll give you a chance to interview them, and hopefully Ms. Andrews can communicate to you before what she expects. But my expectation would be that you're going to use them to simply say, we made contact with her, this is what we got, I identify it, here's what we did with it, gave it to the FBI, and that gets you to the point you were hoping to be the other day with the detective and the GPS device.
Right, and just to clarify, just because there's something Mr. Lee said that concerns me a little bit, is these two officers found her. They knew the FBI was looking for her. They found her. They took her into custody. They took her backpack. They opened it up. They looked at it. They saw what was in there. They gave it to the FBI agent. He packaged and sent it. I don't know that they're going to be able to say, this is a GPS device, because they didn't analyze it. This was Arizona's case, so they sent everything to Tempe.
I'll just take back everything I said.
I don't
Let's
know
just
that the
clear
FBI
it.
agent is
Let's
going to
bring
say
the
that.
FBI agent in, and we'll just clarify it that way. If we don't know what's exactly what's going on here, let's just
Here's
do
what
it
the
the right
FBI
way.
agent presumably should be able to do. If they say, we got this backpack and we filled out this paperwork, or we gave it to this person, if the FBI says, here's what I received, whatever it was from them, and here's the paperwork, and I sent it along, then you're going to get it in, because there's going to be a presumption that what they represented to be there is there, meaning that no one tampered with it. That's going to get you there. Even if they don't specifically say, I remember this GPS device, you're going to get there, but you're going to need every person of the chain to get you there, from my perspective. And I think under the circumstances, unfortunately, that's the best way to go in case there's some testimony about, I remember taking something, but I'm not sure what it was. And then here we go with needing the FBI agent. It's a lot cleaner to get all members of the chain. And
Okay, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm still a little confused here. Can I look at the exhibit itself with the property sheet on it?
sure.
Because I think it's going to help me. Your Honor, what we have, and I'm looking at the box, currently is marked, for identification purposes, is exhibit number 198. And this is the box that was received from Miami by the Tempe Police Department. What we have is a Sergeant Schoenfeld filling out the paperwork. On the paperwork, the number one device that they put on there is a Magellan Roadmate. They also put on a Magellan car charger. There's other items that we may discuss on here as well. And then this was filled out and provided with the backpack that either this sergeant will come testify to or the police officer who was with him the whole time will come testify to, that they took it off Elizabeth Johnson and gave this property sheet and the backpack to the FBI agent who then packaged it and sent it to Tempe Police Department. And my understanding, based on what they told me today, is they were together, all three of them, when this happened, but I haven't confirmed that for sure with the actual FBI agent. So my question is, and Your Honor, the information on here is the chain of custody that talks about who had it, and it talks about the order that they had it in, and the other officer who was with the sergeant is listed on here as too. That's Officer J. Velasquez.
Okay, and your question is?
Well, I'm a little confused at what Mr. Lee was
I
saying
take
about
back everything I said before.
Okay.
And I want the FBI agent. I think that we can just make sure we have no problems. I take it all back. I was trying to be accommodating, but I've changed my mind. Let's just do it the good old-fashioned way and have everybody here.
Oh, and my question, Your Honor, is not whether or not Mr. Lee wants the FBI agent, but whether we would be required to produce the FBI agent to suffice the court's ruling before we get this admitted. That's my concern, because whether Mr. Lee wants it or not is not really the issue. The case law says we don't have to provide every chain in the chain of custody. My belief is their argument is they have to be able to cross-examine the person who actually says they got it off Elizabeth Johnson. And that is either Sergeant Schoenfeld or Officer Velasquez. It is not the FBI agent.
Well, I think the case law says if it moves from one person to another, there needs to be competent evidence of the chain of custody. The problem we have here, if it was the police officers in Florida directly to Tempe, you're fine. But we have someone else who physically sent it to Tempe. I think because somebody else physically sent it to Tempe, that person, should the defense object and insist on laying the foundation, legally, you got to lay that foundation. Now, of course, we all know that typically these foundation things that we know are probably going to work out are generally stipulated to, but sometimes they're not. And for whatever reason, it's their right to insist that the chain of custody be complied with. It's not impossible, maybe unlikely, but it's not impossible that the FBI agent says, whoa, that's the wrong slip. I sent it somewhere else, or there was something else here. They're entitled to find out and to confirm that it is what it is, and it got here in the same condition that it was when the last witness left it. And I think that you have to lay the foundation with the FBI agent if they're going to object. And so that's what I'm hearing. I don't think you need both officers. I don't believe. If they're going to say what you believe they're going to say, I think only one of the two Florida officers, if they were together, probably works. I'm a little nervous about saying, don't worry about the second, and it blows up and suddenly there's an objection and the second had some critical information that I can't envision right now. But from my perspective, I think you do need the FBI agent.
Does it change your position if I tell you that they actually wrote down the serial number on the device itself? And assuming the device that's in the box matches the serial number that's on here?
Well, Mr. Lee, you're going to take back what you took back?
No, Judge. I can see problems on the horizon. And I think we just need to do it the right way, do it the good old-fashioned way. I know it takes some time, and we've got to put evidence on in front of the jury, but I can just see problems on the horizon, and I'm not going to take back what I took back. I think we just need to do it the right way and just get it done.
But let's explore this, because I think we're now into the fuzzy edges of the law here in terms of what's required. Let's say we've got the list with the serial numbers and a witness that says, I took these items from Elizabeth Johnson and confirms these are the serial numbers, and I gave it to the FBI. Now we have a box with those items with those serial numbers here, and we have testimony that, well, do we have admissible testimony that the FBI sent it here? I'm not sure we do, if there's an understanding where it was going to go or the intent was to send it here through the FBI. The Florida officers can probably say the intent was to give it to the FBI to send it here. Is that enough? Even if you object, I'm not asking you whether you're going to object or not. Is that enough? We're getting close, at least.
No, Judge, I don't. For one, we don't have people from the various companies to say, well, hey, this particular serial number is unique only to our product. This is how, this is a particular way we do it, and the government or whoever the licensing agency is only allows us to do it this way. We also have a backpack that clearly doesn't have a serial number on it. There's a number of other items in there I think that they want to get into that don't have serial numbers. I don't know what these officers are going to say at this point. Given the statements by the state, they foresee problems and brought these up and caused me to change my position on this. And so, given the contentious nature of this issue, I think we should just do it the right way. I mean, I don't see what the problem is. Let's bring the people in and let's do it. And get this done. If they can do it, they can provide the foundation, then let them do it. But make them do it the right way.
If I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of caution. And so assume you need to bring the FBI agent in, as well as the appropriate Florida authority or authorities to lay the foundation that what they seize from Elizabeth Johnson is what we're talking about now, so that the detective can competently testify that the information he took off the GPS is from the GPS that actually was taken from Ms. Johnson.
Your Honor, if I may make a statement just to preserve the record on this issue.
Yes.
I know the court has indicated that it is preferred that they give us a heads up on this information, but it's not required. I will point out that we did do defense interviews of all the witnesses in this case. Ms. Phillips asked me, why are we doing defense interviews of these witnesses? And I said, we're doing defense witnesses of every chain of custody witness, just in case it's an issue. They knew that we didn't do defense witnesses of these Miami police officers. They knew in the shortened list that I gave them, it didn't include the Miami police officers. They knew that Detective Bailey was going to testify about the GPS device. They interviewed Detective Bailey on the GPS device. And although, as the court says, they're not required to give a heads up that they're going to object in court, I will point out that the county resources we're going to expend to fly 2 officers out from Miami could have been not eliminated, but could have been minimized if we had been given any kind of heads up from the defense. And I would like to provide that we've been trying to give them a heads up about everything. For instance, my motion to preclude the mental health testimony I filed prior. I provided Mr. Lee a copy of Alan Kreidel's report and told him before Alan Kreidel was going to testify last week, I told him that I intended to use that report and let me know if there were any objections. And he didn't object until we got in court in front of the jury. We discussed, and this is an issue we're going to have to discuss as well, Your Honor, the custodian of records on the phone records, the MySpace accounts. I gave a heads up to Ms. Phillips on that. And I don't know what their position is now, but we're going to have to address that because it seems they're objecting to everything when we get in the middle of trial, and I want to deal with everything ahead of time.
Judge, if I may.
I wasn't finished yet.
It's not finished yet, so you may not.
And so and Your Honor has repeatedly requested that the parties communicate, and the state has been doing everything we can to communicate with the defense about these issues. We do not feel that we're getting the same courtesy, except for Ms. Phillips this morning did come in and talk to us about the issues she wanted to bring up today. But again, with Detective Hutchins' testimony, I brought that up before we even started trial. And at the time I brought it up, it wasn't so much of an issue, but it wasn't raised again by the defense until this morning, just before we came into court to provide testimony. So I'm just pointing that out for the record. I'm not expecting the court to make any particular ruling on it. I would just like to make a record on those issues.
Mr. Lee?
I would like to make a record as well. I feel my character has been maligned here. Look, I got to be honest with you. When I talked to Ms. Andrews about the, it didn't even seem like we had the same conversation when she handed me the paperwork for her handwriting expert. Look, there's a strategy in trial, and that strategy for us is to provide a fair trial for our client. Now, they've had months and years to prepare this case. She's gone to law school. She's practiced law for a number of years. She knows what the rules are. She knows how to get evidence into a trial. Do it the right way.
Okay, we're now into let's make speeches for more than the record, and I don't need to hear that. I understand what's happening, and I understand what the parties' rights are. I, of course, am always going to make a request that you communicate and you cooperate. I'm always going to protect the defendant's right to object the way that the defendant's been objecting. I would tell them if they can't do it. I haven't told them that they can't do it. Would I prefer to hash these things out earlier? Of course. But I'm not obviously going to tell the defense they can't object. I do know that, for example, with respect to MySpace, Facebook, I specifically asked the parties, is there going to be an issue here? Because I could see, hey, if there's a custodian of records issue, that could be messy, and I was assured, no, there's not. So if there is, I may allow them to raise it, but I'm going to be mad about it, and I'm going to express that very clearly because it was represented to me that we wouldn't have one. Now, if we do have one, we have one, but then I expressed unhappiness about it. Maybe we won't have one. So we'll just need to work through it patiently. I hate taking up the jury's time in dealing with this, but if we have to, we have to. What I will tell you, though, to the defense is if you want me, if you want me to give the kind of look at an argument such as the argument about whether the detective can talk about statements made by Ms. Smith at the time of the polygraph, it only helps you, if you've got the better of the law, to give me some time to digest it. And so you're running the risk when there's an objection that's later rather than sooner that you're getting, I won't say an off the cuff, but you're not getting the answer you'd get if I had a couple days to digest it, read some cases and research. You're taking that option away from me to some degree if you're going to wait. Now, in a perfect world, I'm getting it right regardless, but I'm telling you that it makes it harder for me maybe to get where you want me to go if the objections come in really late. Human nature is such that if you've got something that you really think ought to be out and is a big deal, to some degree, I'm expecting to hear it earlier so you can get me ready for it. And when it comes right at the last minute, it can be a communication that either it wasn't a big deal enough for you to think of it before, or you don't think I need any time to really think it through and I can resolve it in a snap decision, and sometimes that's not good. So it's better if we get it done sooner rather than later. I do note the state has brought up some issues, but realistically in trial, things come up and you have to object at the time that either you didn't think about or strategically you wait. And I recognize that. And that's where we're at. That's what we'll deal with. So my concern, again, is just for the jury. I don't want these folks to sit here and just wait while we hash through issues. So what I really want you to do is if we've got an issue coming, like this morning where we had to work through the issue relating to Miss Ayala, and it took us a while, give me a heads up and tell me, and maybe we can come back at 10:15 and get on the record, and I can dispose of my morning calendar earlier if possible, and we can reduce the amount of time they have to wait. or we end later, to try and resolve it when we don't have them waiting. That's my hopeful request, but it's just that, a request. Okay, that was a lot of talking that got us pretty much nowhere, but
Your Honor, we do want to talk about the certifications, and there's a particular reason we want to talk about it today, different than what we talked about in chambers. When Mr. Ostrowski brought that up in chambers, he specifically talked about the certifications. The records that were obtained, just like Detective Larson testified, the records that were obtained in this case were obtained under exigent circumstances. And so they were provided electronically for most of the detectives. And in one case, there was some follow-up, and the records were provided with paper with a certificate. We've had to have the detectives, after the fact, contact these different agencies to get that certification, to certify the documents that were already sent electronically. And so these certifications are coming to us as we're sitting here in trial. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up today, in case the defense was going to object. They are getting them. They've gotten several certifications in the past few weeks. There's one specifically for the MySpace records that I made the detective contact MySpace again and put more information in the certification than that wasn't in the certification that he sent us weeks ago, just because it made me feel more comfortable. And we provided those to defense counsel as we've gotten them. That is my concern, is whether or not they're going to object, not so much to whether or not there are certifications or not certifications, but to the timeliness of the certifications themselves.
okay. Well, I note there was no objection to the testimony regarding the contents of the MySpace documents today. I'm not sure what the defense is planning on doing going forward. Are we going to have an issue that we need to work through?
No, Your Honor, and I don't foresee any issue with any of the phone records either. And I don't really want to get into this, Judge, but I just don't really understand what the issue is, what the perception is that we've done so wrong. There's records, rule, is it 902 that requires just a certification to show that the records were pulled by the custodian of records. I mean, I wasn't even planning on objecting. We did have a discussion about the phone records, I don't know, a week or two, I don't know how long ago, about whether or not she needed to call a custodian of records, and I don't remember who said what, but there was a resolution that we just needed the certification for records, that's all. I mean, I thought I was saving us time by not requiring the custodian of records, because I don't think the rule really requires it if you have the certification. So I'm not really sure what we're arguing about.
Well, we're not, I don't know if we're arguing, but first of all, don't mistake the discussion, at least from my perspective, to lead to a conclusion that I think you've done anything wrong. I don't. Again, if I think you've done something wrong, I'll say you've done it wrong. I'll overrule your objection, or I'll tell you directly that you've done something wrong. I would prefer to have a heads up, but to me that's not the end of the world, so don't take it that way. And I really don't have an issue with what you're doing. I think both sides have generally worked pretty hard to present the case fairly, and I don't, I get the sense sometimes when counsel are waiting to maybe jump out from behind the corner, and that's not what we have happening here. We've got advocates attempting to do the best job that they can, and sometimes we get into disputes, and sometimes you got to take positions that make it harder for them to get things in, and it frustrates them. So be it. I do not have an issue with what you're doing. So what I do want to know, or what I'm telling you is, if you know something's coming and you know it's better to resolve it, and strategically it's better for you to resolve it, or it doesn't matter whether you resolve it sooner rather than later, let's resolve it sooner. That's all I'm saying.
And I think we're all on the same page with that, Your Honor. We're certainly not trying to sabotage anything. We're following the rules. Things come up during trial, as they always do. And, Your Honor gave the example of the 404B motion. Well, we thought we had litigated that last July, but it had not actually been resolved.
All I can tell you is you got to work a lot harder to make me be upset with you or think you're sabotaging. You're not anywhere near a sabotage level from my perspective, and the state isn't either, of course. So
No, Your Honor, and to clarify, I'm actually glad Ms. Phillips wanted to talk about the 404B issue this morning. We also wanted to talk about it this morning. And as far as the phone records and the MySpace records, I wasn't accusing the defense of anything. I was just raising the issue that because these have been provided late, I just wanted to see if it was going to be an issue so we could address it outside the presence of the jury, not because defense counsel had said anything about the records or made any comments. I'm just trying to avoid any issues arising at the time we have a detective sitting on the stand.
Okay, we're fine, and we'll take the issues as they come. I think we've got some clarification, hopefully, on the issue relating to the Florida and FBI. I think the direct is pretty clear with what you need. What else do we need to talk about?
We do have an additional issue, Your Honor. We may as well get it out now. It came to our attention today. Otherwise, we would have brought it up sooner, and I believe Mr. Lee is going to address it for us.
I just wanted to know what the purpose of the ribbons that both county attorneys are wearing. There's a blue ribbon with a gold dot in the middle they're both wearing.
It's Crime Victims' Rights Week, and they've been passed out to everyone who walks in the building.
Okay.
I didn't get
Judge,
Well, our building, I should say, not the courthouse, our building.
and again, I think that we're here in trial. It's an inappropriate thing to have on in front of the jury. And what I would ask is that they not wear those, continue to wear those in court.
My sense is that these come nowhere near the level of communication or message sending, whether it be from an advocate or I think it's litigated more with people out in watching the trial who may wear shirts or pins for victims and those types of things. I think the communication's got to be a lot clearer and more likely to have an effect on a jury. I didn't notice it personally. I seriously doubt that even if the jury notices it, that it constitutes a communication that in any way, shape, or form is inappropriate, unfair. We don't know what those ribbons are for. I don't see it as an issue that really comes close to me directing them to not wear the ribbon. Could there be a situation theoretically that there's something that they're wearing? Maybe, but we're not even to the point where you're close to telling me that they can't wear the ribbon. So that motion's denied. Anything else?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
No, thank you.
All right, so off the record. Okay, tomorrow, Sanchez, you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is John Johnson.
What is it that you do for a living, Mr. Johnson?
I'm a judicial assistant for Judge Michael McVeigh.
What exactly is it that a judicial assistant for a judge does?
Well, we do a lot of things, but basically keep the division running. We keep things on the calendar, make sure that things are calendared properly. We field phone calls, interact with attorneys or with pro per parties if unless they're represented.
Are pro per parties people who are in a case who just don't have attorneys?
That's correct.
How long have you been a judicial assistant?
Altogether, about 15 years.
And how long have you worked specifically for Judge Michael McVeigh?
Judge McVeigh, almost 10 years.
And was that all in Maricopa County?
Yes.
And what type of are you currently working for Judge McVeigh right now?
Correct, I am.
What type of calendar does Judge McVeigh currently hear?
Right now we're on a civil calendar. We've been on a civil calendar for about 2 years, almost 2 years.
Do judges generally hear different types of calendars?
Yes, they're generally on a certain type of calendar for a period of time, and then they have a rotation and then go to a different type of calendar.
In December of 2009, did Judge McVeigh hear a family court calendar?
That's correct. We were on family court for about 3 years.
What type of cases are usually heard in the family court proceedings?
Paternity cases, custody cases, divorces.
And in those cases, are the parties normally represented by counsel?
I'd say probably the majority of them are not represented by counsel. I'm not sure what the breakdown would be, but probably close to more than half are not represented.
As the judicial assistant for a judge, do you normally sit in the courtroom or somewhere else?
Normally, I'm in the outer office. I normally don't go in the courtroom. I do sometimes, but generally our bailiff stays in the courtroom, and I would be in the outer office, and I normally would have the hearings on, and listening to them.
And when you say you have the hearings on and listening to them, you have the capability of hearing audibly what happens in court?
That's correct.
Are you required to listen to everything that's happening?
No.
Do you generally listen to everything that's happening in court?
No, I normally don't listen to everything that's happening. Most of the time, particularly on family court, most of the time I was on the telephone. So.
In family court proceedings, you indicated that you hear custody proceedings. And when I say you, the Judge McVeigh hears
Correct.
custody proceedings. Those are child custody cases.
That's correct.
How is a child custody case normally initiated?
One party or the other would file a petition with the court, and that's how it would start.
Now, Judge McVeigh, during the time you've been working for him, does he allow child custody cases to be initiated without some sort of petition?
No. A petition has to be filed. Something has to be filed before anything gets done.
And after a petition is filed, what generally happens?
Well, then we would get the petition, and depending on what kind of a petition it was, a lot of times people would think that they would file them as an emergency type petition, and then they would bring them to us, and at that point, I would give them to the judge. The judge would look at it and decide what to do. He would decide whether or not he's going to set a hearing or whether he'd make an order from the petition. Generally not. Generally, we would set a hearing.
In cases in which Judge McVeigh decides he wants a hearing set, whose job is it to set the hearing?
That would be mine.
And how is it that you go about setting those hearings?
Well, the first thing I would do is find out from the judge how far out he wants it. And then I would find a spot for it, write the order, and then bring the order. The judge would sign the order. I'd bring it out, a conformed copy out to the party that was waiting, and let them know they needed to get the other side served, the other party served, and that's how we get it on the calendar.
And so it's up to the one party to make sure the other party knows about the hearing?
That's correct. And they have to do it. They have to have them served. I mean, they can't just hand it to them.
Are there ever hearings set in court while you're in one hearing? Does the court ever set another hearing?
Oh, certainly.
And do the parties have to be served if the parties are there in court to hear the new court date?
No. They have notice when the judge tells them our next hearing is going to be a certain time, then they know to be there.
Are minute entries issued in court cases?
That's correct.
And specifically, are they issued in all court cases?
Yeah, all court cases. I would guess yes, but I really don't know. But all the cases that we would have in family court, certainly.
And also in civil cases, criminal cases?
Yes.
And minute entries, what exactly is a minute entry?
Minute entry is the record of what happened in the hearing. Basically contains information from the start time to the finish time, and it's a general description of what happened in the hearing. Also, the judge may choose to dictate something into the minute entry, and those are actually done by the clerk. So I didn't have to do the minute entries, but the clerks actually take care of those.
And when you say the clerks, do you mean the clerks who sit in the courtroom?
That's correct.
And the minute entries themselves, are they ever reviewed by the judges?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Are they always reviewed by the judge?
In family court, they certainly were, yes.
Now, family court proceedings, are those closed proceedings or are they open to the public?
They're open to the public.
And the minute entries that are produced, are those public record or are they closed to the public?
They're public record.
Are there ever situations in which the judge may seal those so that they cannot be viewed by the public?
I don't believe I've ever seen the judge seal a minute entry. Certainly the judge would seal documents, perhaps a motion that was filed if it contained sensitive information, perhaps. Certain things that would be filed, sometimes the judge would seal those, not to be open until further order of the court.
Now, are documents as you're talking about, are they public unless the judge specifically seals them?
That's correct.
While you were working for Judge McVeigh in December of 2009, did Judge McVeigh hear a child custody case involving the parties Logan Scott McQueary and Elizabeth Joanne Johnson?
Yes.
And did that custody case involve a child by the name of Gabriel Scott Johnson?
Yes.
And was there a petition filed in that case for custody?
That's my recollection, yes. That's how I got started.
And to your knowledge, who filed that petition?
I believe Logan McQueary.
And was there a hearing on December 17, 2009?
Yes.
Was that the first hearing in that child custody case?
That's my recollection, yes.
And for that hearing, were you present in the courtroom?
I don't believe so.
And do you recall listening to that hearing?
I really don't recall listening to the hearing. I probably did, but I couldn't. If I did, I don't remember it.
Now, we talked specifically about family court cases being public, but to your knowledge, was this particular proceeding on December 17, 2009 closed to the public for any reason?
No. When we were on family court, we never had a hearing that was closed to the public.
At the time of this hearing on December 17, 2009, had you ever heard of Tammi Smith?
No, not to my knowledge.
Had you ever heard of her husband, Jack Smith?
No.
At the time of that hearing, had you been advised of adoption proceedings involving Tammi Smith and that child who was the subject, Gabriel Scott Johnson?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a parenting conference is?
Parenting conference is a conference that the judge would order when they had children, underage children, in a case. The parties were ordered to meet with an attorney case manager. They actually work for the court. And although I don't know exactly how the proceeding actually went or how they go, but I do believe that it's somewhat like a settlement conference, because sometimes they would get them to come to an agreement on custody, parenting time, and custody and support, and sometimes they would be able to write up a decree and get it signed by a commissioner, and that would be it, depending on the circumstances. Other times, if they couldn't come to an agreement, they would just write a report to the court, and the people would come back for their next hearing.
And does the judge use that information?
I'm sure the judge does use it. He would read it and take it, into consideration.
In the particular case that I asked you about involving Logan Scott McQueary and Elizabeth Joanne Johnson, did you ever have any conversations with Logan McQueary on the telephone?
Yes.
And do you recall how many times you talked to Logan?
I really don't. I would say a couple, but I'm not positive.
And do you recall having a conversation with him after the hearing on December 17, 2009, perhaps around December 18, 2009?
Yeah, I don't know if it was on December the 18th, if it was the very next day, or if it was the following Monday. I'm not sure. But I do recall speaking with him after that hearing, yes, sometime.
And so you had a conversation. Do you recall giving Logan McQueary any instructions on how to proceed?
Objection, call the hearsay.
That question did not overrule. You can answer the question.
Okay. Would you repeat it, please? I'm sorry.
I asked if you recalled giving Logan any instructions on how to proceed, and it's a yes or no question.
Yes.
And after talking to Logan, did he appear in court to file some paperwork later on?
Yes.
And was there then a hearing on December 28, 2009?
Yes.
And did Logan appear for that hearing?
He did.
Did Elizabeth Johnson appear for that hearing?
No.
Now, we talked about Tammi Smith a little bit, and you said you don't recall ever talking to her prior to December 17th, 2009. Do you recall ever talking to Tammi Smith after that date?
I really don't. I really don't recall speaking with her.
Is it possible you may have?
It is possible.
Now, you indicated that part of your jobs are to make phone calls. Who is it? Do you have a system for obtaining information in the judge's office?
I'm sorry, I really don't understand that. Would you please? No.
If people call and they can't reach you, is there an ability for them to leave a message?
Yes, we have a voicemail system.
Okay, and whose job is it to check the voicemail?
That's mine.
On January 4th, 2010, did you receive a voicemail regarding this case?
Yes, I did.
And did the person on the voicemail identify themselves?
Yes,
And who did they identify themselves as?
Tammi Smith.
And did you listen to the entire voicemail?
I did.
And after you listened to the voicemail, what did you do?
As soon as the judge was free, and I just don't recall what was going on. He may have been on the bench in a hearing, or he may have been on a phone call. But as soon as he was available, I played the message for him.
Did you feel that it was important to play it for him as soon as he was available?
Yes.
Was it the content of that voicemail that made you feel he needed to listen to it?
Yes, absolutely.
And after you played the voicemail for the judge, did he direct you to do something?
He did.
And what did he direct you to do?
He told me to call the police, to call the detective, and let them know of the voicemail.
And when you contacted the police, did you tell them about the voicemail?
I did.
And did you assist the police in connecting them to Judge McVeigh so they could talk to him about the voicemail?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Johnson, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 201. Is that a disc of a recording that I played for you this morning?
Yes, it is.
And I then had marked for the clerk, with the clerk? Is that yes?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
And does that depict the voicemail recording that you heard on January 4th, 2010?
That is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move to admit exhibit 201.
Any objection? Exhibit 201 is admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury?
You may. It won't load.
Perhaps we could try the old-fashioned way of putting the laptop close to the jury.
We could do that. So we're going back to the old days, maybe a few years ago. And what we'll do is we'll play it for you. Why don't we try it one more time on the laptop within our system, and if it doesn't work, then we'll play it. I'm optimistic that maybe moving some things around may make it happen, but apparently it's not. And it did work earlier, did it not?
I believe it did.
For some reason, your laptop's not communicating with our system because our system shows that it's set up. So, looks like we're going to have to do this. And Ms. Phillips, if you need to come up so you can hear, you're welcome to come up. I think Ms. Andrews is going to come up in front of you and just hold up the laptop and play it for you. If you have an issue with being able to hear it, let us know. But it should be loud enough off the laptop. So you can get all the way up to the jury. Let me ask, before you put that away, would the jury like to hear it one more time? We kind of brought it over quickly. They're nodding yes. Let's play it again now that we have and the reason it's projecting is the little jury microphone right there that you're on. That's helpful. So let's go ahead and play it from the beginning again so the jury can hear it again.
Yeah, you want me to move it closer to the microphone?
It's a little, you were right on top of it. That's the microphone right there that projects right there. So let's get you set up. We'll make sure the microphone's up at a reasonable level.
This is Tammi Smith. I'm calling about the case with Gabriel Johnson. I am the lady, my husband and I, who were going to adopt the baby. I somebody taking me a call. She's been trying to call me for 2 days to get in touch with me. And she spoke, I have talked to her only through her grandfather. Anyway, I know she will tell me where the baby is, but she needs to make sure that he is going to be safe before she tells me. And I'd really like to speak to Judge McVeigh in order to get some kind of an order. I know that because she didn't show up to court on last Monday, that they gave the temporary custody to the father. I would really like to speak to Judge McVeigh in order to get the baby. She will tell me where the baby is. She did sign the temporary guardianship over to us, and I don't know if that's still, it can still keep it in place so that, while we get everything, while the parents get themselves together and get their act together, maybe the judge can let the baby stay with us, since we did have him for a few weeks prior to all of this happening, and the father decided not to sign the papers, and so it's all spiraled out of control. Please give me a call back at 623-687-1887. Again, 623-687-1887. And I believe the report, let's see, the case number is FC for Family Court 2009-007-470. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, did everyone hear that? Still a little deep. You think it would? Okay, let's play one more time. I want to make sure you hear it clearly, and I apologize for that. We'll make sure our technology is up to speed, but right now we're having a little bit of a struggle. So we're going to play it one more time.
Our battery has died, really.
Your battery just died. We probably have another. There we go. We have the plug-in. Back in the good old days, we only had an overhead projector, and that was it. And so you had a minimum number of things that could go wrong.
Hi, this is Tammi Smith. I'm calling about the case with Gabriel Johnson. I am the lady, my husband and I, who were going to adopt the baby. And somebody could give me a call. She's been trying to call me for 2 days to get in touch with me. And she spoke, I have talked to her only through her grandfather. Anyway, I know she will tell me where the baby is, but she needs to make sure that he is going to be safe before she tells me. And I'd really like to speak to Judge McVeigh in order to get some kind of an order. I know that because she didn't show up to court on last Monday, that they gave the temporary custody to the father. I would really like to speak to Judge McVeigh in order to get the baby. She will tell me where the baby is. She did sign the temporary guardianship over to us, and I don't know if that's still, it can still keep it in place so that, while we get everything, while the parents get themselves together and get their act together, maybe the judge can let the baby stay with us, since we did have him for a few weeks prior to all of this happening, and the father decided not to sign the papers, and so it's all spiraled out of control. Please give me a call back at 623-687-1887. Again, 623-687-1887. And I believe the report, let's see, the case number is FC for Family Court 2009-007-470. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. Hopefully everybody heard that.
Mr. Johnson, on or about January 14th, 2010, did you assist the police department in obtaining some court documents?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do to assist the police on that day?
I placed a call to someone in the clerk's office, and I believe it was, I believe I remember who it was, Chris Kelly, but, and asked them to get the court records ready for the police department.
And do you recall what that was in regard to?
I think what started that ball rolling, I believe, was a document where there was a question on a signature, whether or not it was the proper signature, whether or not it was we had a couple of signatures, I believe, that didn't match, as I recall. I'm not sure. I just don't remember how that came to our attention, but
And other than calling the clerk's office, did you do anything else to physically obtain those documents for the police?
you know, I don't remember if I burned a copy of that myself. I may have, but that wouldn't have been the original. That would have just been something that I printed out of the computer.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Cross-examination, Ms. Phillips?
Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning.
And just to clarify for the record, you're not in any way related to Elizabeth Johnson, are you?
That's correct.
Now, you testified that you had not heard of Jack or Tammi Smith as of December 17th, correct?
That's correct.
And that would have been the date of the first hearing with Elizabeth Johnson
Right.
and Logan McQueary.
Right.
And there's no reason why you would have known of them at that time, correct?
As far as I know, yes. I mean, that's correct.
And you described for us the proper, what I like to call the paper flow, or the paperwork process in family court, correct?
Yes.
Did you read every piece of paper that came through the judge's office when you were on the family court assignment?
Did I read every piece of paper? Probably not. No. I mean, they came through in the hundreds. You know, I couldn't read all of them. But
Let's talk about the family court assignment. How long were you on the family court
3
assignment?
years.
3 years.
And let me interrupt you for 1 second. You're tending to jump into the answer. You know what the question is going to be. Make sure you pause so you're not talking over each other so our court reporter can take everything down.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Go ahead, Ms. Phillips.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is it fair to say that family court is a very emotional place at times?
absolutely.
Okay. And do you get a lot of phone calls at family court?
I sure do.
Okay. And can you tell us approximately in any given day how many phone calls family court might get?
There were days where it seemed like the phone would start ringing the minute I walked in the door and would ring all day long until I left that evening.
And is it fair to say that there were days you got 25 to 30 phone calls?
I would say that at a minimum, yes.
Minimum.
Yes.
And the phone rings off the hook, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And partially because it's such an emotional time for so many people, correct?
Correct.
And so you get phone calls from a father who's upset about a custody issue, maybe, right?
Yes.
Or you get calls from a mother who's upset about a custody issue, right?
Yes.
But sometimes you'll get calls maybe from people who are not parties to the actual case that will call, right?
Yes.
Maybe a grandparent of the child involved in the custody case will call.
Correct.
Maybe a new spouse of somebody involved in a custody or divorce case will call.
That would happen a lot.
Okay. And those are people that are completely unrelated to the litigation.
That's correct.
Sometimes you would talk to those people?
Yes, I would talk to them. I would try to be polite, but I wouldn't give them the kind of information that I would give parties.
Okay, so you you couldn't really give legal advice, right?
That's correct.
And so you would explain that, I assume, to all of the callers,
Absolutely.
even if it was a party,
Yes,
because you're not an attorney.
correct.
Be
Not
glad
qualified.
for that. Yeah. Okay. Now, we listened to Tammy's phone call a couple of times. Is it? I believe you said it was. You don't recall talking to her, but it's possible.
Yes,
And you don't recall because it's been a couple of years.
that's correct.
Okay. And at the time you talked to her, maybe there would not have been any significance attached to the case at that time?
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Okay. But you're not really sure because you just really don't remember.
I just couldn't swear to it.
In any event, is it fair to say you're positive that Tammy did not contact the judge's division prior to December 17th? You're positive of that? That would have been the date of the first hearing.
Well, I couldn't say I'm positive of that. I certainly don't remember it. I don't recall that she did. It's possible. I just wouldn't want to say I'm positive that she didn't do it. I certainly couldn't say that she did, and I don't remember her doing it.
Okay. Thank you. And this message that we just heard, you listened to it
Yes.
the day it came into the judge's office.
Yes,
And you played the message for the judge.
that's correct.
And did you normally play all the voicemails that you received for the judge?
No.
No. You played this one because this case was already in the news and you thought it was significant to tell him, right?
Yes.
And the judge did not call Tammy back, did he?
No, he did not.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect. Sanders?
Mr. Johnson, do you ever have adopted parents as parties in family court cases?
Adoptive parents?
Parents who have adopted the child or who are interested in adopting a child?
No, that's under juvenile.
So
You mean for the adoption process?
the adoption process itself.
No, that's a dependency matter in juvenile court.
But for a child custody case, are there ever adoptive parents involved in the child custody cases?
Would you clarify that for me?
Well, let me ask you, this case in particular, from our understanding, involves child custody between Logan McQueary and Elizabeth Johnson.
Yes.
If there was another family out there who was in the process of adopting the child, would that be information that would be considered by the court?
I'm sure the judge would probably want to know about that because the judge wants to know, what's happening. He wants to know everything about the case.
And at the time of the hearing on December 17, 2009, in this case, was there any information that was happening?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we let Mr. Johnson step down, does the jury have any questions for him? Going once, going twice. May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Phillips? You may step down. Thank you. And Ms. Ramona, you may proceed.
Detective, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Detective James Welling. I'm a computer forensics detective for the City of Tempe.
How long have you been employed with the City of Tempe?
A little over 7 years now.
And how long have you been in the current position that you hold?
Since September of 2009.
And what specialized training do you have in that area?
I've received specialized training in computer forensics from the International Association of Computer Forensics Investigators. I have a certification that takes approximately 12 months to achieve.
Okay. And does that enable you to examine solely computers or other devices as well?
Computer forensics is more about process, so it allows me to examine any technical device such as a cell phone or a computer or anything related to that.
Because essentially those devices operate similarly to computers, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to draw your attention to January 6th of 2010. Do you recall being asked to participate in an investigation involving missing baby Gabriel Johnson at that time?
I do.
Okay, and on that particular date, do you recall what it is that you did?
On that date, I assisted Detective Thompson with the examination of a cell phone.
Okay, and was that a Motorola Evoke QA4 CDMA cell phone?
Yes, it was.
All right. And where did you obtain that cell phone?
Detective Thompson had brought it to the computer forensics lab at the Tempe Police Headquarters.
Now, what did you do to examine that cell phone?
Initially, I attempted to use a computer forensic device called the UFED, the Universal Forensic Extraction Device. It's just a small appliance that is an automated process of grabbing information off of a cell phone and putting it into a human-readable format. We didn't have success with that because the text messages didn't come off. So I then helped Detective Thompson with manually manipulating the phone as we examined each of the screens for text messages and call history.
And when you manually manipulated the phone, what did you do to document what you saw on the phone?
As I held the cell phone and swiped each screen, it's a touch screen, like not dissimilar to an iPhone. As I swiped each screen for each text message, Detective Thompson took a picture of each of those screens.
Okay. And after the completion of the manual exam of that phone, was the item taken back and impounded into evidence?
I believe so. Detective Thompson retained it.
All right. So your participation in that ended at assisting in the manual examination?
Correct.
All right. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the date of January 12, 2010. Do you recall following up on a lead that was called into the police station at that time?
I do.
Okay, and was that regarding Facebook entries on an individual by the name of Bambi Dallas?
I do recall that name, yes.
And what did you do to follow up on that?
I don't recall. I don't have an independent recollection. I think I did some phone calls to attempt to contact that subject. There was 2 leads, and I can't remember the details on either one of those leads. They didn't lead to anything. They were not related.
Okay. Is there anything that would refresh your memory regarding your follow-up on that lead?
If I could look at a supplement that I wrote for that, which I don't have with me.
Sure. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective Welling, is that a supplement that you wrote in this investigation?
It is.
All right, and why don't you take a moment to review that, and when your memory is refreshed, let us know.
Okay.
Is your memory refreshed?
Yes, it is.
All right. And regarding the tip that you followed up on January 12, 2010, what did you do?
I printed out a copy of the message. It was on a MySpace, and it involved some names similar to the case, Elizabeth and a baby in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, and did you also observe the Facebook page of an individual by the name of Bambi Dallas?
I do recall the name Bambi Dallas and the Facebook page, yes.
Okay, and did you print out that Facebook page at that time?
I did. It should have been attached to the report. I don't see it in this copy here.
Okay. I'm showing you what's marked as Exhibit 199. Does this look like the page that you printed out?
Yes, it does.
Now, also on January 12, 2010, did you examine another cell phone, a Nokia 1661 GSM?
Yes, I did.
And was that received from the Miami Police Department?
It was.
All right. Had a examination previously been done on that before you received the phone?
Yes, the Miami Beach Police Department did a UFED exam, just the same appliance that I use, they did that exam.
Okay, and you just did some follow-up work on that, is that correct?
Correct.
Now I'm going to draw your attention to the date of January 14th, 2010. Did you assist in a search warrant of Tammi Smith's home?
I did.
All right, and what did you do with that search warrant?
At that search warrant, we checked the house for any electronic devices such as computers, cell phones, and those types of items, and located several of those items inside the house.
Specifically, did you find a laptop computer?
There was a laptop computer that was located on the dining room table, a desktop computer in the, I want to call it the laundry room where the washer and dryer were. There was a digital camera in there as well.
And did you also examine 2 cell phones at that location?
I did.
Okay, and whose cell phones did you examine?
The cell phones of Tammi and her husband.
Okay, Jack Smith?
Correct.
All right. Now, what did you do to examine the cell phones at that location?
We had brought that UFED appliance, the forensic appliance, with us for the search warrant, and I used that device to extract information or examine both phones. The first phone, Jack's phone, wasn't cooperative, let's say, and so I ended up manually checking it, and there wasn't any information on there. It was just a basic flip phone, very little information on it.
Okay. Now, at that time, you were looking for information as to the whereabouts of the baby, correct?
Correct.
So when you were manually examining that phone, what you were looking for was information about Gabriel Johnson specifically?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't find anything at that time on his phone?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you have an opportunity to examine Tammi Smith's cell phone?
I did.
Okay. And how did you go about doing that?
The same process of using the universal forensic extraction device, attaching it to that, and then extracting information and exporting it out to a thumb drive.
And is this extraction device one that you've utilized in the past?
Many times, yes.
And that you've been trained on the use of?
Yes.
And did you follow the procedure necessary to use that extraction device?
Yes.
Were there any problems? You indicated you had a problem with Jack's cell phone. Were there any problems with Tammi Smith's cell phone?
No, there were not.
And specifically, her cell phone, was it BlackBerry Pearl?
Yes.
Now, once you extracted the information from that cell phone, you indicated it went on a thumb drive?
Correct.
Okay. And what happened to it from there?
The thumb drive, the information extracted to a thumb drive is a document. It puts it into a portable document, a PDF document, and so it can be read, and it categorizes it by the contact list, text messages sent and received, call times, and that type of information. And I brought that back to the station after the warrant and impounded a copy of that, I believe, and gave copies to the case agent.
And did you printed it out eventually? Is that what you indicated?
Correct.
I'm showing you what's marked as Exhibit 200. It's a 53-page document. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And is that the forensic report from Tammi Smith's cell phone?
That's correct.
Now, when you observed her cell phone, did you also observe email accounts that she had?
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, when you looked at her cell phone, did you see that there were certain email accounts connected with her phone?
I did.
Okay. And did you write down the names of those accounts?
I did.
All right. And was one TammyFaceSmith@gmail.com?
Yes.
And the other JDSmith001@gmail.com?
Yes.
All right. What did you do with the information at that time?
I then obtained a search warrant and served it upon Google and received requesting all the information for those email accounts since, I want to say, October 15th to that current day that the warrant was requested.
Okay. And did you receive information back from those search warrants?
Yes.
And did you impound those?
Those were in data files so those are retained at the forensic lab.
Okay. Now, you indicated you served it upon Google. Is that because Gmail is associated with Google?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to draw your attention then to the date of January 24th, 2010. Did you, well, actually, let me back up. What other participation did you have in this investigation?
Other than that, I assisted with the monitoring that went on at the jail and the wire. That was it.
Okay. Let's talk about the monitoring at the jail. What did you do and who were you monitoring?
On certain, I wasn't there all the time. There were certain people scheduled at certain dates and times, and on the date and time that I was there, I observed Tammy come to the jail. She had another female with her that was, I think, later identified as a reporter. She requested a visit with Elizabeth Johnson. She went to the room where they talk, and then I monitored that conversation.
Okay. And did you obtain any specific conversations that you had witnessed or observed during that time period?
There was the conversation between Tammy and Elizabeth. I audio recorded that and impounded that audio CD at a later time.
I'm showing you what's marked as exhibit number 43. Do you recognize that, Detective?
I do.
And what is that?
It's the CD that I impounded the audio on.
And are those your initials on the back of that envelope?
Yes, and that's my handwriting on the disc.
And that's the recording that you obtained?
Correct.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
May I suggest this is a good time to break?
I don't want to leave too many minutes on the table. But I'll indulge you. You're within the 10-minute window that I'll indulge you. All right, so we're going to take our lunch break, and we will come back at 1:30. Just to give you a heads up in terms of schedule, because we're kind of stopping and starting, we're at or really ahead of the schedule we thought we were going to be on, so no worries in terms of a schedule. That's not what we told you it was going to be. We're fine in terms of schedule. We're going to take our lunch break. Until then, remember the admonition, and we'll see you at 1:30.
All rise.
Okay, please be seated, everyone. Detective, you can step down. You don't have to stay up there. You can step down. You don't have to stay up there. We're outside the presence of the jury. Just in the future, because if we make them wait and we start late, I'm not going to be super enthused about ending early. I know it's just a few minutes, but still psychologically for them. So be ready for me to say, let's keep going, unless we're just within a minute or two of the break. Anything we need to talk about from anyone's perspective before we break for lunch?
Your Honor, can I utilize the time now to re-urge our request to elicit testimony from Dr. O'Connell?
No, probably not. I mean, I want to do it in the context where we have a little bit more time. I thought I heard you tell me that you were going to put some things together, I thought, in terms of either a transcript that you could point to.
I need to speak to your court reporter about getting the transcript of Ms. Ayala's testimony, and I have not had a chance yet to do that this morning.
Okay, because I'm going to want to, if you're going to cite the specific areas of testimony, I'm going to want to make sure I understand exactly what the testimony is. If there's any additional authority, or we're still talking about Mott et al., obviously, I want to have those things in place before we have an extended discussion. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to talk about it now. I can accommodate you. We'll carve out time. Whenever we have the information we need, I can accommodate you and we can talk about it.
Your Honor, was just going to ask that if they're going to re-urge it, that they do so in writing and cite to specific case law if they're going to address specific case law. I'm not asking for something majorly extensive, just to give us a heads up on what they're specifically pointing to that they think now makes it admissible. That would help us along with the copies of the transcripts.
There's no requirement that the motion be in writing. I would prefer something in writing, but an oral motion is legally sufficient. I think it only helps the cause if you give me something in writing. So I would prefer to have something in writing, but I'll entertain oral motions as well. I think on this subject, the motion probably should be in writing.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, and then what we'll do, we'll start at let's try and at about 1:25 have a discussion about the detective's proposed testimony. That'll give you a chance to look at the transcript. I'll look at the cases, and then I'll make the determination then. All right, anything else we need to talk about before our lunch break? All right, I'll see you at about 1:25. We're outside the presence of the jury. Ms. Smith's here, counsel's here. Before we talk about the issues relating to Detective Hutchins, we have a juror issue. Juror number 10, bottom left, so closest to me, the bottom row, has expressed that she is very upset because she's having an issue with the lengthy trial fund. Specifically, the jury folks are perhaps not agreeing with what her request is. She's been struggling to come to a resolution. I don't know all the details. What I do know is she's emotional about it, and that she's expressed concern that if it doesn't get resolved, she's not sure about continuing. I am optimistic we can work it out. Sometimes, and as I remember, I think she's a beauty consultant, kind of self-employed. That makes it harder probably in terms of records. She doesn't have a salary, so it's probably harder for her to provide the documentation that needs to be provided. But I'm optimistic that they'll work with her. Our folks that work with the juries do a really good job of making sure they look at everything. And I've had difficult situations before, and they're willing to go the extra mile to really see if there's income that needs to be replaced. So I'm optimistic we can make it work. She was downstairs apparently over lunch trying to work through it and is upset about it. I think she's okay now. And I won't get involved unless I need to, and by getting involved, what I would do is I'd bring her in an open court to just talk to her about working through it. But let me see if we can get it resolved, and I'm optimistic that maybe we can get it resolved over the weekend. I'm not hearing anything that's affecting her fitness to continue as a juror. If it's a long-term issue, that issue doesn't resolve, then we do have an issue because she's going to be distracted. I think she's okay for today, and if I sense that there's a problem, then I'll do something about it. Meaning if I see that she's emotional, then I may send everybody out and have her come back in and talk to her this afternoon. I don't want to do that now, and I'm hoping I don't have to. Any questions about that from anybody?
No, and how did this come to the court's attention? Did she express this to Kim?
Yes, okay. She spoke to my bailiff, Kim. So that's coming from her to Kim, Kim to me.
Okay, thank you.
And I will certainly let you know if I hear anything else. My hope is this, that it gets resolved over the next day or two, and then we don't have an issue next week. But I'll follow up and make sure that we don't going forward. Okay, so that's the immediate issue I wanted to talk about. Now let's talk about Detective Hutchins. Ms. Phillips, have you had a chance to take a look at the transcript that was provided now?
Yes, Your Honor, I have. And first of all, I would like to clarify that are we going to call him Detective Hutchins because he is a civilian? I think it's an important distinction when he's on the witness stand, how he's represented. He is not, my understanding is from his own words in the interview, he is a civilian employee of the Tempe Police Department.
I think we can refer to him as former Detective Hutchins, a civilian employee.
I will address him as Mr. Hutchins.
Okay, that's fine. I do note that he represented himself to be a civilian employee, and I think we call him Mr. Hutchins, and he is a civilian employee.
Thank you, Your Honor. And my concern about the statements, Your Honor, I did review them over the lunch hour, is that from the way they are marked in the transcript I was given, it appears that they will be possibly taken out of context. So my concern about being able to cross-examine him is to put those statements in context without us getting into the whole big picture that we don't want into evidence. And obviously, Judge, I'm incorporating my earlier arguments as to why I think his testimony should be precluded.
Okay. And anything else from your perspective?
No, Judge, I just don't want to leave the jury with a false impression on these partial pick and choose statements, that's all.
All right, let me address that. First, let's go to the broader issue. I do think he should be permitted to testify in terms of any concern that I had regarding a confrontation clause issue. The Arizona cases aren't directly on point. They do suggest, though, that in and of itself, the fact that a statement's made before, almost during, and or after a polygraph test does not mean that they should be excluded. Now, no one directly addressed the issue of how do I then cross-examine. One was a voluntariness issue, and I don't think they directly apply. But I think what they do teach is that there's not anything inherently wrong with information gleaned during or around the time of a polygraph. Here, I don't think the context is so important or so defines the conversation that it needs to be brought out to ensure a fair cross-examination. I certainly don't think there's a confrontation clause issue here with what I reviewed. So I don't have a problem with the detective testifying. This is what was said. I don't have a problem with the way the state proposes to introduce him and present how the encounter took place. I will tell you, I did have a concern generically when I looked at the transcript about just taking some of the answers somewhat out of context because it's a rambling exchange to some degree. It's a discussion, so it doesn't come across cleanly. And you have some things marked that read in isolation to me, you could see them as somewhat misleading. But I don't think, he's not going to get up, we're not reading the transcript. He's going to relate what she said. And I need to hear how that comes in to see how the cross-examination would be accomplished. But you've got to be able to, I think, take statements that maybe immediately followed some of these statements and follow up with them to put them into context. And you have the ability to do that with the transcript. So I think, I don't really believe there's a lot of mischief here in terms of a constitutional violation or some other problem. I did note, though, I did have one issue that I was worried about in terms of one of the marks and whether it can come in, and that's on page 23, and it's line 1028. It's a question, have you ever been in trouble for answer? Hold on, let me think. I think I might have embellished something in court because I went through a child custody case. Okay, I'm to the next page. I might have embellished something or made my ex-husband look worse than you know. But to the best of my knowledge, I tried to be as completely honest as possible. I'm a little worried from a 403 perspective about that. I can't tell. You wrote future on that, and I'm not sure if that means maybe you're not going to use it.
Should have marked it a little more clearly. I think I wanted to alert the court and defense that we may use that to impeach the defendant in the future.
All right.
That I did not intend to elicit it at this time because I don't think it's appropriate at this time.
Then I didn't have to worry about it. Okay. In direct, I was concerned, but it's not coming through direct and not coming through this witness. Okay. All right. Anything else? So what I'm taking is the motion to preclude or limit the testimony of Detective Hutchins is denied for the reasons set forth on the record. Anything else we need to talk about before we bring the jury in? From the state's perspective?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
From the defendant's perspective?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're picking up again with cross-examination. So let's be ready for that. And Kim, you can go ahead and get the jury. So Detective Welling, you want to come on back up. You know where you're going to be going, so you might as well go there now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch. We left off with Ms. Phillips getting ready to cross-examine Detective Welling, I think we have a request to admit an exhibit first, though. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. The state moves to admit Exhibit 200 at this time.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 200 is admitted. And by way of reminder, that's the forensic report for Ms. Smith's cell phone. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Exhibit 200 is admitted, and Ms. Phillips, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Welling.
Good afternoon.
You testified this morning that you looked at the Gmail accounts of Tammi and Jack Smith, correct?
Yes, I was responsible for getting the subpoena,
Okay, you obtained them.
or the warrant, I'm sorry.
You
Yes.
obtained them, okay.
Right.
And that's just their Google email accounts, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you did not find any communications in those emails between Tammi and Elizabeth, correct?
I searched for, at the time, we were looking for baby Gabriel, so I was searching for name searches of baby Gabriel and adopt and things like that. I didn't look at individual emails. I just did a search of the whole mail that came to me from Google.
Okay, but you didn't find anything, right, relative to this case?
Correct.
And you examined Jack Smith's cell phone,
Correct.
and you found no information, again, relative to Gabriel.
Correct.
And you examined Tammy's cell phone,
Correct.
her BlackBerry,
Yes.
and you were able to obtain some information off of that, correct?
That is correct.
And you were able to obtain her contact list,
That is correct.
and you were able to get a call list as well.
That is correct.
Okay. But you don't know the contents of those phone calls, correct?
That is correct.
And so all you know from those is just maybe who was called and when they were called.
Correct. Phone number, dates, and times.
Okay. And again, there's no way to know from the information you received what the contents of those phone calls may have been.
That is correct.
And you also examined Elizabeth's phone.
Yes.
That was the phone that came from Florida.
There were two phones, yes.
Okay. You looked at both of them.
Yes.
Okay. And in her contacts on one of those phones, she lists either Michelle or Michael, right? M-I-C-H-E-L. There's a contact there.
The one that came from Florida,
Yes.
the T-Mobile phone, I believe, yes.
Yes. And you noted that there were several calls to and from this Michelle on December the 29th and December the 30th, correct?
I don't have an independent recollection of that. I'd have
If
to
I
look at the
showed
report.
you your report, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it would.
You did file a couple of supplemental reports in this case?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may. You don't need to.
Okay. Okay, Detective, please take a look at that.
Okay.
And does that refresh your recollection, Detective?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a person named Michelle, or maybe they pronounce it Michael. It's M-I-C-H-E-L.
Correct.
Listed there. And there are some calls to and from this Michelle on both December 29th and December 30th of 2009, correct?
This first page you showed me is the one that I did. The other report is the one that was performed by the Miami Beach Police Department.
Okay, well, you've reviewed it though, right?
Correct.
Okay. Does it show that there's calls to and from this Michelle on December 29th and December 30th?
Yes. The one from Miami Beach, yes.
Okay. And do you know if that Michelle person was ever contacted by anyone?
I do not.
And do you have any idea who that person is?
I do not.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor. Ma'am.
Thank you. Redirect, Ms. Romano.
Yes, thank you.
Detective, the phone number associated with that Michael or Michelle, do you have your report still?
You're going to have to give it back to
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I have a copy.
Do you have a copy of it in front of you that you brought yourself?
I do.
Okay. Could you please use that to refresh your memory?
Yes.
Just refresh, let us know.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm looking for, I have the first page that she showed me. I'm looking for the other two calls.
May I approach the witness here?
You may.
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And what is the phone number associated with that name, Michael or Michelle?
The SIM card from her phone had contained that phone number, and the phone number was 305-926-9511.
Okay, and I believe you stated this already, but did you do any follow-up on that particular phone number?
No, I didn't.
Are you aware of what area code that comes from, or?
No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Before we let Detective Welling step down, does the jury have any questions for him? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused, Ms. Romano?
Yes, thank you,
Ms.
Your Honor.
Phillips?
No objection.
You may step down. Thank you. And the state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls David Hutchins.
Okay, so go ahead and get Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Romano, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, would you please state your full name or introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Dave Hutchins, and I work for the Tempe Police Department.
And what is your position at the Tempe Police Department?
I'm a investigator right now.
All right. And do you conduct investigations of civilians?
Yes.
All right. Have you previously been involved with law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. But your current position is a civilian position with the City of Tempe Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to direct your attention to the date of January 8th, 2010. Do you recall at that time becoming involved in an investigation involving a missing baby by the name of Gabriel Johnson?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And were you asked to conduct an interview of Tammi Smith at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And did you, in fact, conduct that interview?
Yes, I did.
All right. Where did that interview take place?
At my office, Tempe Police Department at 10 West Guadalupe.
Okay. And when that interview took place, did you meet Miss Smith?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you see her in the courtroom here today?
Yes, she is sitting in with the red shirt at the defendant's table.
Okay. Your Honor, would the record please reflect this witness has identified the defendant?
It shall so reflect.
Now, when you met with her, did you go over the fact that she did not have to participate in this interview with her?
Yes.
Okay. Did you tell her that she could leave at any time?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And that she could end the interview at any point at which she chose?
Yes.
And did she agree to participate in the interview with you at that point?
Yes, she did.
What was your purpose? What was the purpose of the interview to find information regarding the whereabouts of the missing baby?
Yes.
Okay. And possibly her involvement in it?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So when you asked her questions, was it tailored to get answers to those questions?
Yes.
All right. Now, can you briefly describe your interview with her?
Yes, it was a very non-confrontational interview. It was meant to try to get her to give us information which might lead us to the whereabouts of the missing child.
Okay, and was she able to give you any information regarding the whereabouts of Gabriel Johnson?
Well, she told me where she thought that the baby might be, yes.
Okay, and where did she think the baby might be?
In Victoria, Texas.
Okay, and did she explain to you why she thought the baby might be there?
Yes.
All right, and what was her explanation?
She said that her last contact with Elizabeth Johnson was that she was somewhere in Texas, and she believed that from the information that she pieced together, and that she believed that the child was in Victoria, Texas.
Okay, and did she explain the sources of her information, or did she just state that she pieced that together?
Well, she said that it came from a variety of sources, but she believed that Victoria, Texas was where the child might be.
Okay. But she didn't state for certain that she knew that's where he was. She just thought he might be there.
Yes.
Would you please describe the interview further from there?
Really, it had to do with her contact or working with Elizabeth Johnson to try to, first of all, adopt the child and also avoid, I guess there was, in my belief of what she was telling me, my understanding of what she was telling me is that the adoption proceedings weren't going as she had anticipated, and that she was going to she originally was going to adopt the child, but that Elizabeth Johnson left the state of Arizona, and that's when they decided to, or when she decided to just tell Elizabeth Johnson to bring the child back to Arizona.
All right. Now, did you ask her some specific questions about her involvement with Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
All right. Specifically, did you ask her if she planned with anyone to hide Gabriel's whereabouts from the authorities?
Yes.
Okay, because that was a concern at the time, correct?
Yes.
And what did she state?
She said that she wasn't trying to hide the baby or the child from the authorities, but that the father of the child.
Okay, so she wasn't trying to hide them from authorities, but from the father of the child. Is that a correct statement?
Avoid the father, yes.
Okay. And did she indicate how they went about, or how she went about trying to do that?
Yes.
And can you please tell the jury?
Well, in the adoption proceedings, she believed that because the father was not, his name was not on the birth certificate, or that the child was born out of wedlock, that the mother of the child had to say so and could make decisions regarding the child's adoption proceedings without the input of the father.
Okay, and did she talk about how they were going to do that? Adopt the child without the input of the father?
Well, yes, she wanted to change jurisdictions from Arizona to a state that would allow that to occur without the father's input.
Okay. And originally, she told you that she felt that Elizabeth Johnson felt she could go to another state and do that. Is that
Yes.
correct? And that at some point, she became involved by investigating the change of jurisdiction.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
What she said is that she helped Elizabeth Johnson research over the internet, research the change of jurisdictions, and then when she learned that that wasn't going to be able to be done because a court proceeding in Arizona had already started, then she told Elizabeth Johnson to come back to Arizona.
Okay. And specifically, did she make a statement to you that when she first started to talk with Elizabeth Johnson, that the motivation was to change jurisdictions.
Yes.
Okay, and then she clarified that then once they found out that they couldn't change the jurisdictions, that's when she asked Elizabeth to come back.
Yes.
Did she indicate that she had also asked a friend for advice on that situation?
Yes.
Okay, and that at the time, for a split second, she thought maybe that would work?
Yes.
And was that in regard to changing jurisdictions?
Yes.
Because of the fact that they weren't married?
Yes.
Did you ask her that at some point, did you bring up the topic of her still wanting to gain custody of the baby or adopt the baby?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She said that we're not, that they weren't interested in that anymore.
Okay, and that was on January 8th of 2010?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, specifically, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You had asked her if she had planned on secreting the child or putting him in hiding. Okay.
Yes.
And you indicated that she said she didn't want to avoid authorities or the judge, but the father.
Yes.
Did she also talk to you about the court dates that were involved in this case?
I don't recall specifically about the court dates.
Is there anything that would help refresh your recollection?
Sure, my interview was, of course, tape recorded.
And you reviewed a transcript of that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Let us know when you've refreshed your recollection.
Yes.
So during that part of the conversation, just to go back a little bit, the initial part of the conversation was first about changing jurisdictions, correct?
Yes.
And that the original motivation was to avoid the father.
Yes.
And then when they found out that they couldn't do that, and found out that she had a court date, that's when she encouraged Elizabeth to come back.
Yes.
And go to court and attend the court hearing.
Yes.
Now, did you ask her if she knew the reason why Elizabeth left the state of Arizona? Or what her understanding was?
Well, from my understanding, she's believed that Elizabeth Johnson was going to meet some people in Texas for an adoption, to give the child to some people in Texas.
Okay, so that was her conclusion after Elizabeth left, correct?
Yes.
Did you ask her, though, what she thought the original reason why Elizabeth left the state was?
Well, she had told me that she didn't know that Elizabeth Johnson was going to leave the state.
Okay. When you were talking to her in that part of the conversation, you asked her the reason why Elizabeth left the state of Arizona was what? Do you recall that question?
I don't recall the exact question, but if it's in the transcript, that's what I asked her.
Okay. And she said, "I'm sorry, say that again." And you said, "As far as you're concerned, the reason why Elizabeth left the state of Arizona." And then she goes into a narrative response.
Right.
Okay. Do you need to review that response?
Sure.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
Does it refresh your memory?
Yes.
Yes, okay. When you asked her the reason why Elizabeth left the state of Arizona, what was her initial response?
Well, just like I said, she had planned with Elizabeth Johnson to change jurisdictions and perhaps go to Tennessee or some other state where they could change jurisdictions.
Okay. And in fact, didn't she specifically say that up until yesterday, with me remembering that she had a Garmin, up until yesterday, the reason was that it wasn't going to be an easy shot for us to adopt the baby.
Yes.
And then did she go on and say that she did research into different states, and then she backtracks and says not different states, but the state of Tennessee, correct?
Yes.
And she specifically said, because we told her, maybe you can go to the state of Tennessee. Is that what she said?
Yes.
All right. And did she also say, she also informed you that she already let authorities know this information?
Yes.
Okay, and that they had friends and family in Tennessee, and that they gave her the name. They didn't give her anybody's name, however, except for someone by the name of Janet Morris.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who Janet Morris is?
It's, from my understanding, it's a family member of Tammi Smith.
Okay. And that she had found, once she found out from Janet that they couldn't change jurisdictions, then they encouraged Elizabeth to come back.
Yes.
All right. And actually the plan changed at that point and she said that they were then moving on to possibly adopting Elizabeth herself.
I didn't recall that part, but...
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Could you please review the first paragraph on page 54?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what she said.
So she said that at that point then, when they found out they couldn't change jurisdictions, she encouraged Elizabeth to come back and suggested that they adopt Elizabeth.
Yes, and that they would help take care of the baby.
And then once again, she reiterated that once she found out they couldn't change court jurisdictions and that the courts were involved, that she claims she ended all involvement with this matter.
Yes.
And that was pretty much the end of your interview with her?
Yes.
About how long did this interview take place?
It was well over an hour.
And during this interview, did you ever threaten her in any way?
No.
Or harass her? Or...
No, as I said, it was very non-confrontational. As it's depicted on the transcript, there's a lot of time where she just goes into a ramble about the incident.
Okay. And you followed up with some follow-up questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. May I have a moment?
You may.
I have no further questions.
Thank you for cross-examination, Ms. Phillips.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hutchins. I just have a few questions for you. You told us that the purpose of the interview was to find out where Gabriel was.
Yes.
And Tammi, told you where she thought Gabriel might be.
Yes.
Where she thought Elizabeth might be.
Yes.
And she told you that she thought that might be Victoria, Texas.
Yes.
And she told you that she got that information from her last contact with Elizabeth.
Yes, and other contacts other information that she had received.
Okay. And she also told you that she did not know where Elizabeth was.
Yes.
And she told you that she thought that Elizabeth, and I'm paraphrasing, she thought that Elizabeth had custody and could do what she wanted because she was not married. She told you that.
Yes, she did.
And she told you some things that you've told us about her talking about helping Elizabeth change jurisdictions, correct?
Yes.
And that once she learned that that was not a legal possibility, she told Elizabeth to come back to Arizona.
Yes.
And you asked her in that interview, did you tell Elizabeth, did you tell her to come back, bring Gabriel, get back here, go to court? You told her that? You asked her that?
Yes.
And her response was probably 50 times?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Before we let Mr. Hutchins go, does the jury have any questions for him? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused, Ms. Romano?
Yes,
Ms.
please, Your
Phillips? May he be excused? You may step down. Thank you. And the state may call its next witness.
State calls Rachel Hoover.
Okay, let's go ahead and get Ms. Hoover.